it's frustrating because the myths about history are so common. Most people think it's fact. And one thing I learned when I was studying history at university is like everything you know is basically not true.
Well, Cav, thank you so much for joining me today on Growing Up Fundie. I'm really excited to have you on my channel and on the podcast. I don't exactly remember how I found your stuff on Reddit, but a few months ago, I stumbled across your stuff on Reddit. I think somebody had shared it on a subreddit involving agnosticism or humanism, and I kind of went on a deep dive on your channel. And something that I thought was really cool was you cover a little bit of everything. You cover some pop culture, some like current events, a little bit of everything. But when I found your videos that were related to atheism and agnosticism, they were really in depth. Your videos don't come across as a guy who touches a little bit on everything. You really do your research. You have receipts, you've got clips, you've got argumentation, you've got refutation. I thought it was really fantastic. And then I learned that you have a degree in history and a master's in international relations, which I thought was really cool too. And I just wanted to get to know more about who you are behind the camera and how you even got started as, I think you said you originated as an atheist channel and then kind of went from there. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so in terms of the atheist stuff is, I guess I could talk about growing up a tiny bit. So I'm raised Irish Catholic in England, so it's like a religious minority. I think the amount of Muslims and Catholics in England are quite comparable, which might surprise some people.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of terrible history between Irish Catholics. So it's the thing of Irish Catholicism, especially as like a religious minority, it's more like an identity rather than a religion.
Yeah.
Even though I went to church, I was an altar server even until I was like 15, so that's quite a long time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I believed in it, but obviously when you grow up in that environment, stuff kind of seeps through. Like I'd always think, well, God's not hearing me pray. Like he's probably not real. And I didn't have Catholic guilt either, because I was just like, when I was doing like bad things as a teenager, I was just like, well, if I'm going to hell for this, I guess everyone I know is going to hell, because if God is like that petty, and this is like I'm a teenager thinking this. And then I slowly developed like my more, I'd say I developed my religious identity more, or my atheist identity before my political one, which posed some problems. But yeah, basically like a lot of atheist people, like, what do you watch when you're, coming out of religion? You watch Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, some other people. So that influenced me a lot. And I don't think in completely positive ways, but it influenced me enough to reject like faith completely. And then I went to university, studied history, and I started doing a lot of religious modules, started doing like the Crusades, the history of the New World with the Spanish, and some stuff to do with Islamicism. And I was like, I really like find this fascinating, but it just adds to my argument so much that it's like nonsense basically. So I always tackled history, religious stuff from a historical angle rather than like, did God create the universe? Because I think sometimes that's just, it's too much back and forth, where the history one's really interesting to me because you see how religion develops in that it literally does not resemble the original form at all. So in my mind, if God is even real or Jesus is even real, the religion you believe in is nothing to do with them, basically.
We've still had it wrong for hundreds of years, even if he's real.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Roman Empire have decided what your religion has been like 1,800 years if you're a Christian, like Emperor Constantine. But anyway, when I was learning about stuff, also I learned about like this guy called Josephus. Josephus, is that his name? He was basically like a Jewish guy who defected to Rome, and he wrote a history of like the Roman conquest. Anyway, I just found that also super fascinating. So I started a radio show at uni, saved the name of Kavernacle for later. So I just called it something stupid. I forgot what it was. And then I made my first YouTube videos at university, but I didn't take it seriously. But also all my videos back then was just atheist. And I just thought like in my 21-year-old, 22-year-old brain, religion was the most oppressive thing in the world. And whether that be Islamicism, whether that be, Christian fundamentalism in Africa or America, or, sectarianism in other places, or stuff to do with Israel or anything like that, I just saw like religion is the worst thing. So that's when I started making all these atheist videos. And that's why if you watch my like more recent videos on atheism and skepticism and stuff, that's why I seem to know a lot, because I wasn't in the community, but I was consuming a lot of that content. Because we were talking about like Thunderfoot before, like that stuff. Not that I would watch like, oh my god, I agree so much, but I'm like very aware of people like that. But to me, I just found it far too right wing. And I think with the rise of ISIS, I think new atheism just became very xenophobic, and it kind of turned me off. And I mean, it started with the rise of ISIS, but it progressively got worse with like refugee crises and stuff like that. So I found it very xenophobic, and then I just kind of developed my political identity a bit more. I was a bit of like a centrist, centre-left contrarian, I would call it. I had very weird politics. Like I'd support Bernie Sanders, but I might vote Conservative in the UK because I felt like, oh, the UK is better because our politics, the Overton window is way more leftwards. So then that's when the atheist stuff kind of got dropped and like anti-capitalist left stuff got promoted. And then I was always like left wing when I was a proper YouTuber, but becoming more like communist. And I see it as compatible with my atheism, but just it's like once you reject one belief system, for me that was religion, like totally. And then the next one is like the economic ideology, which is capitalism, which is also really tied up in the West with Protestantism a lot of times. So for me, it was very easy to take the next step and reject that as well. So it's just like I'm very against like the status quo, basically. So I think, like you were saying, like there's a lot of atheist content, but I think even though I wouldn't primarily do that now, it's more like I think it helped me on my journey to just reject different things. And you know, like I'm just lucky enough my experience of religion wasn't really traumatizing because like I said, Irish Catholic minority religion in England, London, which is, you know, pretty progressive anyway, so it was okay, basically. So that's my journey from like
that's very interesting
religious to atheist content creator.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are not atheist would be surprised because I do think, especially in the like YouTube sphere, I feel like there is this stereotype where if you're atheist, that also means you're far left-wing individual, especially here in the United States, when in reality, atheism has its own right-wing and left-wing individuals. You can find some extremely right-wing people who also just happen to not believe that God exists.
Yeah, Richard Spencer in America.
Yeah, so many. Like, especially some of the videos of yours I was watching, it was reminding me of all these right-wing conservative atheists I used to see like pop up on my YouTube timeline back in the day, you know, 10, 11 years ago. And so it's very interesting. And now this might be a dumb question, and I mean no offense, just out of curiosity. Do you have to be Irish Catholic, or is Irish Catholic a type of Catholicism?
Yeah, so it's not a type of Catholicism, but it is like an identity, and it pretty much stems from being othered by the British colonization of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So you can have Northern Irish Catholics. So Catholicism in Ireland is tied up with republicanism. So Catholic communities in Northern Ireland, which is still part of the UK, they vote for Republicans who want unity with the Republic of Ireland. So it's kind of like you can't escape your Catholic identity, because if you come from the south of Ireland, you will be Catholic. And if you go to the north and you run in with maybe the police and stuff, they will know that, and they will probably treat you differently based on your Catholic identity, regardless of if you believe in it or not. So it's like how a lot of people identify as Muslim without actually believing in Islam, because it's kind of like put onto you by society. And obviously in a, you know, white society, no one ever says anything to me. Like no one's ever said anything to me about being from an Irish background. But in my mum's generation, and she has an English accent as well, because my grandparents are immigrants, they would say something to you because you have an Irish name. And it's all just associated with being the negative associations of being like a terrorist, basically.
Yeah.
You're an Irish Catholic.
Like xenophobia.
Yeah, like a Fenian is a slur. So Fenians were like the OG IRA in like the 1800s. So you call like an Irish Catholic a Fenian. And so it's not like a different thing of it, but it's like I said, it's an identity. So it's important to say, like, I wouldn't say, oh, I'm Irish, and then they'd be like, well, what religion? You're just like, oh, I don't know. It's like, you know, you Irish Catholic upbringing, but it doesn't necessarily mean fundamentalist religion or anything like that. It's just like more like anti-imperialist republicanism, which is very common. So it is a good question, because lots of people will say they're Catholic in Ireland. Lots of people don't believe in God. So it's very contradictory, but it's what they will say at the same time.
Yeah, I almost feel like in countries outside of the United States, your religion almost kind of becomes like a race, where like you are Catholic, but you don't go to church, you don't believe in Catholicism, but you're Catholic or Protestant or whatever. Whereas I feel like in the United States, it's you are Christian and you live, breathe, die Christian, or
Yeah.
you're not. There's no in between, even though there is. They just like to pretend there isn't.
I was
Very
reading something
interesting.
about that. I think it's just the cultural element. So like I think they said it's like Irish Catholic, Hindu Indians, and Shiite Muslim Iranians. It's like such a cultural identity because of how long that like a massive majority have been there.
Yeah.
So even if you don't necessarily believe in it, it's like it's kind of just like part of being Iranian or from parts of India or from Ireland and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
like you're saying, it's like not everyone is like fundamentalist, whatever, but you have that identity based on history, basically.
Interesting. And so in your family or even in the area where you live, I guess atheism wasn't something you actually had to come out as. It wasn't like a surprise or a shock to anybody.
No, no. So my parents, like, they're like really secular and they say they
Yeah.
believe, but then it's kind of like I don't think they do, but they
Right.
say they do based on tradition. Like my grandma, if you know any like okay, I'm gonna say Mediterranean. My grandma just looks insanely Mediterranean. Like I must have some immigrant background in Ireland, but if you've seen like these old like Italian grandmas, that's my grandma. She's like saintly religious, like so crazy religious.
Wow.
So I think that's just played off my mum. Where when I actually challenge her about stuff, she is kind of like she doesn't really agree with a lot of stuff, but it's kind of like I still believe in it. I think a lot of people fundamentally, even if they don't take it seriously, they just want to believe in life after death.
Yeah.
Where I didn't have to come out as atheist. Most people I know, they wouldn't be like an ideological atheist, but most people I know don't care about religion, don't go to church. Like I went to Catholic school, and I'd say like 95% of people would like you're seen as weird if you go to church still. If you were writing something about God on your Facebook or Twitter, people, like this happened when we went to uni because we were friends with this like Protestant girl, and she kept talking about God. And I was like, this is so strange. And she didn't go to religious school. And I was like, we literally got raised in 2 religious schools and none of us care about it. So
That's wild.
it is very, I think when I was watching Spotlight,
Mm.
that film about the Catholic Church, and they're all
Mm.
talking about like being raised Catholic, but none of them believe in it. That's what reminded me of everyone
Yeah.
who's raised Catholic in the UK. Like I'd say you might have conversations where people say like I might believe in God, but other than that, no one would be like, oh yeah, the Pope talks to God, like no sex before marriage, no, don't want to sin or something like that. Like, yeah, but I think I've heard different experiences from different parts of England, but like everyone who I went to school with was basically immigrant or immigrant background, like second, some of them first, but second, third, like I'm third gen. And it's just more like progressive, and it was a mixed school. Like lots of Catholic schools aren't mixed as well. So I might have just had a very unique experience, and in that experience, like this like melting pot at a school, you just don't really like have a uniform like belief system. Like whereas if you went to like a all boys Catholic school in Ireland, it'd probably rub off a bit more. But with us,
Yeah.
like no one really cared, to be honest.
That's so interesting. I feel like there are parts of the states that are like that. Like in the North, I lived in Chicago for a long time and nobody really cares. I've never
Yeah,
seen
that's what I
anybody
was
really
saying.
care in New York. Yeah, but
The
uh
Irish Catholics in New York and Chicago and Boston, I bet would be pretty similar, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. And then you have South in America, in the United States, and they're just woo, it is wild. It is like yeehaw, you are Christian down here. Yeah. Even
Yeah.
when you're not, you are kind of thing. Um Very interesting. And so when you were making that content, did it bring you peace or did it bring you relief or did you feel like you learned anything or do you feel like it kept you mad? Did it help at all? I've always wondered if
Yeah.
like making that content a lot impacts somebody's psyche.
So I said this. What I always liked YouTube is my all my friends basically. I'm not friends with them based on shared interest. All my friends I've known since I was a kid. So like either since I was 5 years old or since secondary school, which is like our high school, like 12 years old. So we're not friends based on shared politics or values or anything like that. Even though we all kind of have come to the same place, although I'm far more political than all of them. So I just felt like it was a nice outlet for me to talk about what I wanted. And it's kind of like a nice full circle moment because we were talking just before we started, in that I love history so much, and I love religious history as well. I love talking about it. So I'd start my channel like making these videos about like the Crusades or various different things. And obviously when I just started, I wouldn't do that well, but now I'm like a lot bigger and I still make them, and now loads of people like them, and it's actually relevant. And I guess it's like vindicating now, because sometimes when you study history, people are like, well, why would you do that? It's the past, it's not relevant. And you can feel that sometimes, because that's like, you know, you're reading history books about 1,500 years ago, but then, you know, we're having this whole Anglo-Saxon discourse again in America. And I've studied that and read about it, even though it's so ancient history now. It's like I can come and say like, no, Americans, you're probably not like pure blood Anglo-Saxon, because that term doesn't even make sense in the first place. It's like what, five different like ethnic groups mixed into one. So like it's kind of like vindicating, because now I saw Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire just recently said the First Crusade was a defensive war, and I'm like, oh, I can make a video about that, because I know like that's a lie, but he's like a Catholic, like fundamentalist Catholic. So it's kind of like, yeah, for me, it's kind of it's like, I guess you're asking if it's cathartic or makes me angry. I don't think it makes me angry anymore, the religious side, but it is kind of maddening. Like I was really in the gutter arguing about this Aztec thing recently, and and I guess what it is I feel depressed reading that, but then it's nice that I have such a big platform. I can respond to it, and so many people watch it, and I can tell people like, no, that's wrong. Like I know like thousands of people are saying it on Twitter, but you know, I'm telling you it's this. So I guess now, it used to be like cathartic in terms of like an outlet for me to talk about stuff I like. And now it's kind of like, I'm happy I can like make comebacks to like really terrible cultural stuff. And because of the size of my channel now, it actually has some sort of tangible impact. So that feels really good for me personally, because I'm like, I guess I don't consider myself egotistical, but it's kind of like, when you're very well read, and obviously like I have a good education on this stuff,
you know what you're talking about.
You kind of want to use that to push back against stuff. And just sometimes it's just about like the facts, really. It's not about like my opinion. It's like, no, this is just like wrong. And that's why I like using my religious knowledge and everything to like combat all that stuff, especially because when you get older, that's, I guess what I've learned is how much fascism relies on very revisionist history, especially of religious groups and stuff. It can be of pagan groups like Spartans and Vikings and Roman Empire, but also like now, like, you know, Spanish conquistadors is one, and what they did. And it's just very like, for me, it's just feels very vindicating now, but in a depressing way, that the far right are so emergent on social media, on like in America especially. It feels like I've got good knowledge to push back against that. So that feels good for me personally.
But
yeah, and I guess it is frustrating though.
Well, that's the only group also that I feel would ask you why you would be interested in the past. I truly, the minute you said that, I was like, oh, right-wingers, right-wing Americans. Yeah, that sounds about right. Which is interesting to me, because a lot of the same people that would say something like that are like, why do you focus on history? Why do you care about the past? We're moving forward, are the same ones that are like, the rebel flag is just a symbol. Read a history book, yada, yada. And you're like, you just said not to. But
well, they don't want you to read a history book, because I got people on Twitter yesterday saying like my history degree is pointless because it's woke history. And that's why I'm saying, that's why I'm saying native genocide by the Spanish is bad. And I'm like I literally like, I'm linking accounts from like Catholic priests at the time, like literally in the 1500s, who were absolutely horrified by what they saw. And it's like, no, that's woke history. And it's like, you just want to believe what you want to believe. And like I was saying to you earlier, it's like history basically dispels pretty much all the myths you believe, because you grow up in like a white supremacist Christian society. So you're fed a bunch of myths to justify why this society or this status quo in the world even exists. So most people believe pretty terrible things. And it's important now in a time of like the rising far right and stuff, you're meant to say like, oh no, this is just basically a lie. What they're saying to you is a lie. It's not true. And fascist movements traditionally always do this. Like they lie about the past to make it seem better, or to justify what you're doing now. Like, like I was talking always about those traditional Catholic or traditional like men accounts and stuff, and they do the same stuff. It's like the past was better. So then you have to just point out that while the past is more complex than we realize, it was really terrible, and we shouldn't be like, oh, let's go back to the colonial period of America. Let's go back to Jamestown. Like, what a great time. It's like, no.
Anybody who says, let's go back in the past because history, old times were better, is probably white. It's probably a white person.
White, straight man. And like I was also saying, like, it's a lot of that, the straight part don't even matter if you're going back to ancient Sparta or Rome. But It's like you see the idolized version of like 1950s America, but going back even further, it's like, why would you want to serve in the Roman Legion until you die, like 50 years or something? It's
Listen,
like, no.
I just wouldn't have the internet anymore. That alone would send me coming right back to 2023. I do have a question for you though, and maybe this is your area, maybe this isn't, but growing up in the United States, we're always taught that we came over to the United States for religious freedom, that we were being persecuted because we believed in God. And we came over here so that we could finally find a place where we could worship God the right way, the real way, yada, yada. Talking to a friend from England, he said, no, you guys were chased out because you were psychotic zealots who kept trying to push your Christianity on everybody.
So
is there like a balance there? Is one of those... I'm guessing the American version isn't true.
The American version isn't true.
Right.
Basically, the people who fled to America were extremists, even by the standards of the day. Like, we're talking about the time of like Oliver Cromwell, who overthrew the British monarchy. Like, he basically started the subjugation of Ireland for Protestants against Catholics, and then that was expanded upon by another king called William of Orange, who was a Dutch king who came over. Basically, we overthrew our own monarch because they wanted to be more tolerant to Catholics, but the people that went to America and New England and stuff, they were extremists. And although like they eventually fell under the British crown, like you see this with the Salem witch trials, the stuff they believed in was pretty like fanatical. And it was also, the difference is Protestantism is historically pretty austere religion. It's about like, not worshipping idols. But the Church of England is Protestant. But the Church of England is basically the Catholic religion with the monarch of the UK as the head of the church,
and divorced.
So, if we're talking about Henry VIII, for sure, that's definitely part of it. But also you have historic, like that's the short version. But you have like King Alfred the Great, who had his own church. They kind of wanted to bring that kind of back, like this more independent church. But yeah, like this was more like had loads of wealth. It was, like I said, basically the Catholic Church, but a different version. So the Protestants in the UK, like I'm not sure what the original ones were, like probably Calvinists or Lutherans. That was not compatible with the Church of England. So, and this is why they went there, because they were extremists. But obviously, just ordinary UK people came later anyway, and like the British government came to settle. But yeah, like religious freedom is an interesting way to put it. Like having this really, really fanatical Protestant, like austere system where like the only day off was Sunday, and like you work to death basically to appease God. Like that's, the Church of England is a bit more like the Catholic Church. So all you've got to think about is the mainstream Protestant movement in the UK was the Church of England, not Lutheran or Calvinist like in France or Northern Europe. So that explains the difference. It's basically like, if you think about how Lutherans and Calvinists view the Catholic Church, it's probably how the original American settlers who were very religious, they viewed the Church of England, because it was like very wealth driven. And obviously if you have the king as the head of the church, it's probably, you probably think it's an affront to God or something, because it's not appointed by God.
Right. And there's the whole like don't worship idols thing, the Calvinists, man, those are some of the most intense religious people I've ever met or heard of. But I've always thought it probably went a little bit more like we were the people with the billboards on the corner talking about how like the end is near and like repent or you'll burn in hell. And everybody in Europe was like, hey, can you go somewhere else with that? And we were like, my God, we cannot worship here. Wow. Thank you. We're going to go find freedom where we can do things the right way. And the weird thing is, we have not changed one bit. We have not changed at all. And yet, for some reason, that version seems so complicated for us to get in line with. It's like, we were crazy zealots? No, we're only crazy zealots now. That's only a modern thing.
Well, it just explains the whole difference in the like a relationship between Americans and religion and British people and religion. Like, I do admit that Ronald Reagan ushering in this crazy evangelical right as like a mainstream political force might have skewed people's perception of how religious Americans actually are, because I wouldn't say they're a fringe, but they're still like a minor. It's like Roe v. Wade. Like, was it like 70% of Americans supported keeping it? And that includes Republicans.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, like, even if you look at the battles between the British Empire and the American revolutionaries and like what happened afterwards, it's pretty clear the American revolutionaries were far more like zealous about their religion, like in how they conquered the native peoples and stuff like that. Yeah. And obviously like Britain today is secular. if you talk about religion, really, like instead of like a throwaway comment, maybe, but if you start talking about like God tells me to do this, people are like you're a weirdo, and like most of this country still identify as Christian, so it's like,
Yeah.
And in America, it's like, I think I read a poll, it might be a bit old now, it's like they'd rather have a Muslim president than an atheist president, which is crazy considering how xenophobic parts of America are, especially.
Yes.
And this was during the War on Terror, like at the height of the War on Terror, they said they'd rather have a Muslim than an atheist. So
Yes.
it's just kind of like, you know, this American society generally is just way more, and obviously the anti-communism plays a massive role. Like you have the UK, which is like the birthplace of communism, and then you have America, which is like the birthplace of insane anti-communism. Well, I'd say Russia is the birthplace of anti-communism, but America it falls in behind as well. That's why they changed the Pledge of Allegiance to have loads of religious stuff. It was in the 50s to be like anti-communist and stuff. So like it is a very weird difference.
Well, and I think also something interesting you brought up is, you know, they would rather have a Muslim president than an atheist president. Something even weirder that I experience here in America, I'm not sure if it necessarily makes its way out of America, is here it is worse to be the wrong type of Christian than not Christian at all. So, for example, if a Presbyterian and an atheist were running, a lot of evangelical Christians that are not Presbyterian would rather vote for the atheist than for a Presbyterian. It's the wildest thing I've ever seen. Like, for example, I grew up Baptist. I grew up Southern Baptist. And I thought that was what was considered Fundie. I thought that was evangelical. And still I started meeting evangelicals and talking to them, and fundamentalists and talking to them through the podcast. And it turns out Baptists have always been the not real Christians. We're always the wannabe fake Christians because we don't do everything. Apparently people hate us. I had no idea. But that's such an odd thing that I've run into is like, yeah, we're Christian, but we're Baptists. We're not, you know, the Pentecostals, the weirdos. We're not the Methodists who don't really pray. They just want to claim they're Christians. It's very strange. It's
very weird to me because these words you're saying, of course I've heard them, and I think, was Hillary Clinton a Methodist or something?
I think so.
And so, but I'm like, I don't even know what that means, because it's like I have Lutheran, Calvinist, Church of England. That's Protestantism to me. But then you're saying Methodist, Baptist, and it's just like all these different sects of American Christianity, which like I don't know what even blends into that, like different, because obviously
I can tell you. I can give you
okay, what's the difference between? So you said Presbyterian, Baptist, and Methodist. So that's the three main ones.
Oh, there's more. There's so Baptist, I would say, is the easiest one to be a part of, because Baptist is where you're at also when you're kind of deconstructing. Like a lot of people who I've never seen step foot in a church ever will say that they're a Baptist because it's just easy to say.
Oh, okay.
So Baptists love casserole. If you go to church and you have lunch afterward, there's always going to be a casserole. Methodists are like super liberal religious people. So if you go to a Methodist church, there might be a female pastor. There might be an LGBTQ affirming pastor. You're going to find that at the Methodist church before you're going to find that anywhere else. So whenever somebody's Methodist, it's like, oh, so they don't take Christianity seriously, I guess. But oddly enough, they also do communion like a Catholic.
Catholics.
Yeah, which is interesting to me. Then you've got like your Calvinists, right? Which everybody thinks are crazy. Then you've got your offshoots like the Duggars, like IBLP, which are like cults. You know, we've got, and everybody agrees they're crazy. Whether you're Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, Pentecostal, everybody thinks IBLP and those guys are crazy. Pentecostals are the ones that always have the long hair and the long skirts. They're not allowed to cut their hair because in heaven they're going to use it to wash the feet of Jesus. So anytime you see a woman in the South who's got really long hair and is wearing a denim skirt that like touches the floor, she's a Pentecostal.
Oh my God. I've never heard of that.
Well, see, I only know this because I grew up like steeped in Southern religion. I wouldn't expect anybody else to care about this. Like, why would they even care? But because you want to make it so apparent that you're one of the good ones, you know exactly who the other ones are, if that makes sense. Like, I would never want to be mistaken for one of those crazy snake wielding Christians because I'm a Baptist. I'm one of the real ones. We're the friendly ones.
It's really interesting because it's not like Orthodox versus Catholic or Protestant versus Catholic. It's like literally, it's basically, I guess, because America developed not in isolation, but you have so many communities that like develop in relative isolation where where the Orthodox Church has, you know, proper authority, and then the Catholic Church has the Pope, Church of England has the King and the Queen and stuff. So I guess it's interesting that like these places could just develop, and like you're saying, some have communion, but that's a Catholic thing.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if that's a Church of England thing as well. I wouldn't be surprised, but it's just like pick and choose what you want, but also take parts of the Bible and just be crazy about it. Like, I bet there's Christians that don't eat like lobster and stuff because of the
literally
Bible.
Yeah, like fundamentalists. So you've got the fundamentalists, right, who literally believe the fundamentals of the Bible, like what it says is what it says. And you've got the evangelicals who are like, no, that's a metaphor. We still don't like gay people, and we still don't want you to have sex before marriage, and we're going to shame you about a bunch of stuff. But like, where the Bible says mean things, that's just a metaphor. That's not actually what it says.
Yeah,
you know,
that's basically
God
what I got taught, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get taught Adam and Eve is real, and I went to Catholic school.
Really?
Adam and Eve and Noah, they never told us. They said that was a story, like a parable, basically.
That makes more sense too.
Yeah. Old Testament is basically not seen as real, apart from the historical things like Solomon and David. But even like David versus Goliath was never taught to us like Goliath was real.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. That's that's like the most wonderful thing I've ever heard, because it should not be. It is.
Yeah.
And
which is absurd, isn't it? Like, and it's also it's the hardest one to reconcile with reality. Like, if I'm believing Jesus is the Son of God, at least it's written in the hindsight of here is Jesus, whether he existed or not, in a historical time period. Here is like the King Herod. Here is Pontius Pilate, and it's like, okay, like it seems a bit more real. But when it's like, oh yeah, the Earth was created like 7,000 years ago. Here's a massive flood, but there's no record of.
Yeah.
It's like Moses, and it's like there's no record of this migration of Jewish people going to Egypt at this time. And it's like it's so easy to debunk. Where at least with Jesus, it's kind of like, because there wasn't good records, you only have like 3 Roman scholars. Some mention him, some don't, and it's kind of like, oh, like maybe he existed. But like with the Old Testament, it's like, well, none of that. Obviously, none of that existed, and that's why I guess it's probably a better, like, for religious people to not emphasize that any of that stuff is real, because it's so easy to debunk.
It would be so, I feel like, so we're having like a mass exodus in the US of people being like, no, I'm not religious anymore. Well, I say mass exodus, but it's more people than ever before. In no way is Christianity threatened or anything. But I feel like a lot more people would stay religious if somebody were like, this sounds like Aesop's fables to me. I get it. They're trying to teach me a lesson through these characters that never existed, as opposed to, no, all human beings came from Adam and Eve. The Nephilim were real. They were real things that existed. And there's nothing you can tell me that's going to make it not true. And you're just like,
yeah.
And it's so easy to see how that would not be the case. I don't know.
Well, it's also because the contrast is so stark between Old and New Testament. Like, if you're a Hindu, you believe in like a multitude, like a pantheon of gods, but none of your religion like basically carries over into contemporary history. So trying to reconcile that the Son of God was alive during the Roman Empire, but everything else happened like so long ago, there's literally no record of it. And it's like, how are we meant to reconcile? Like, one could be reality and this person could have existed, and the other stuff is just pure like nonsense, like a snake, Garden of Eden. And it's like, so that basically, because the first time I learned about Richard Dawkins was in religion class. Like, we learned about all the different faiths, including atheism. And like we were exposed to that, and we taught science as well in school. So we were never taught, like, I don't think a Catholic school can reconcile teaching kids science that like the Earth is millions of years old or like billions of years old. It's like, and here is the religion that says that no, it's fine. Like that, I think they had to blend it in a way. I don't know if it's like the English Catholic Church have decided on this course that, you know, this is what, you know, we're going to teach now. But yeah, we were never taught anti-science stuff. Vague, maybe. I forgot the word now. What's the word of just not having sex that religious people
abstinence.
Abstinence. There was some abstinence taught by like third-party groups sometimes, but there was also like sexual education and stuff,
right?
So it's kind of like we were saying, if you want people to stay religious, I would just like focus, if it's in a secular society as well, I just focus on the stuff that like can make a bit more sense. Like, oh, Jesus was a good guy, here's him doing good things in this like time which was quite like tumultuous, rather than, oh yeah, here's a terrible God wiping out all humanity because they didn't worship him enough, and like Noah's Ark and stuff. Like but it's insane that like people do actually like believe that, like and it's crazy that in more like secular societies, like the US, for example, is relatively secular. It's like they still believe like Noah's Ark or the Garden of Eden and stuff.
Yeah, rapture anxiety, real thing. It's a real
Yeah.
thing. The rapture is still like a big belief here. I was telling somebody about the rapture the other day, and they did not believe me. Somebody who's raised non-religious.
I never even learned about Armageddon properly until we read the Bible at university and studied Armageddon, like biblical prophecies and stuff, because it's like the thing that people don't realize. So in my third year of university, we did a module called the Bible and History, where we actually had to read the Bible, and it was so fucking insane. I was like, I can't even believe like this is part of the same religion. It's like the person talk about demons with like 6 heads and like dragon and like griffin bodies, and it's like, what drugs was this person taking when he wrote this? This is like nightmare fuel. And it's like, where did it, like, the thing is, that's something I'm really interested about, is like drug, even though I've never taken recreational drugs, but drugs and religion really interest me, because when you think about certain religions, it's really key. And I'm like, well, Christianity doesn't really have that. But then I'm thinking about like maybe ancient Jewish people who wrote the Bible. I'm like, they probably were doing something, because some of this stuff is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what like shocked me. I was like laughing, like we were reading it. I was like, this is so hard to read, and it's also insane. Like it's like I'm reading. It's like I'm like I don't know, like a mad person's written this,
like a fever dream.
Yeah, it is like someone's just written down some hallucination they've had, and it's just like the fact that people read that like, yep, Armageddon with this terrifying 5-headed griffin thing coming over to destroy all Jewish people in the Roman Empire. It's like, oh yeah, like that sounds rational. Like, but the thing is, most people don't read that part. Like,
they don't read it at all. That's the problem. Most people don't read it at all.
This vague notion of nuclear Armageddon, or like what a lot of I don't know if you were taught this. Evangelicals are taught support Israel so it can start war with Iran, start Armageddon, where all Jews will be killed if they don't convert, and Christians will be taken to New Jerusalem. Have you heard this one?
I did not hear that one.
Okay,
that's
so
new.
It's common. I don't know. It's common in the evangelicals who voted for Donald Trump. What group would they be? Is it just evangelical?
So evangelicals as a whole covers a few different religions. But I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. Just random blanket evangelical Christians saying something like that or believing something like that.
Yeah,
that's not surprising.
So basically, it's like what Ken Copeland believes in and stuff. It's really insane. So so basically, a lot of people get charged with being anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel, but it's often by people who are evangelicals. Yes. Like you hear a lot with Republicans, like Ilhan Omar, the anti-Semite, or AOC, the anti-Semite. They've said something bad about Israel, but they only support Israel as part of biblical prophecy. And it's that in Armageddon, in one form of it, basically New Jerusalem will be taken from Israel and raised into like the heavens, and all the Christians who believe will be on it, while the rest of the world descends into chaos. And in some Armageddons, it's the Roman Empire fighting like the armies of Jesus. But in the new form, it's basically they support Israel so heavily, like militarize them, because they want them to start war with Iran, and they think that will start like some sort of nuclear exchange, which will kick off Armageddon, because they believe some of the prophecy that it has to start in this part of the world. It's really it's crazy, but it's worse that a lot of these people then become like Mike Pompeo believes in this, and he was Secretary of State and head of the CIA.
Leadership, and
it's like the head of the CIA wants to start nuclear Armageddon so he can be taken to heaven and stuff like that. It is like when you're like more rational person, or even if you're like a secular religious person, like surely these people don't believe that, but they actually do believe it, which is so scary, because because we all think like, especially Republican politicians, they all do it for power. Like surely that they just say that to appeal to like these crazy people. But then it's like, if you're in that echo chamber your whole life, why would you not believe in it? Like suddenly, like you've been raised in that culture, you've gone through the political machine where you're talking with people all the time, you get into power, and now you're hardcore backing Israel. So why would I believe that suddenly you don't believe in this prophecy that you've been taught your whole life? So it's the scary thing about American politics, is that as scary as Donald Trump is, it would be actually scarier if he was as religious as people, like, you know how much evangelicals support him. It'd be even more scary if he was like one of them.
Yes,
because then he
actually
could
believed.
do like, he would actually could rationalize. Like the big fear with new atheists used to be, well, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, it will just start launching them, because the Ayatollahs, they all believe in paradise. And it's like, obviously really naive view, but then it's like, you're thinking about America, and it's like, what if someone like Donald Trump without support, but was actually believed it? It's like, what if they got into power? And
that would be wild. Although I do think that most people who got a lot of money and a lot of power by either using religion or directly through religion, I do think that they actually are entirely atheists. Like Kenneth Copeland, I don't think that man believes in God. I think he literally just likes being a multimillionaire.
Yeah,
Benny
he failed
Hinn
as a
back in the
singer
day.
and then did
Yeah, like
well.
all these megachurch pastors, I don't think Joel Osteen actually believes in God. I think at a certain point, you're just a businessman who understands that you can make a ton of money
Yeah,
by
it's like that
lying to
Hillsong
people.
guy. What is his
Yes.
name? The one with friends with Justin Bieber.
Yes. I know who you're talking about. I was just
Greg.
talking to somebody.
Greg.
Oh,
I don't know. I
uh,
made a whole video on him ages ago.
yeah, I was just talking about him the other night. Let's see, leader of Hillsong. But yeah, I think a lot of those people just recognize that religion is a quick way. Let's see. Um, there's a few. It pulled up a bunch of names. There's
Yeah, I'll find him because
yeah. Um,
yeah, because it's
but
an Australian thing, isn't it?
yeah,
So if
yeah.
you type in the
Well,
name, it comes up Australian.
you would think, but now it's making its way over here. And also apologies if you can hear my dog snoring. I'm not sure how loud that is on your
Oh no,
end.
I can't.
Okay,
Carl
good.
Lentz, that's it.
There it is.
Carl
Yeah.
Lentz is the Justin Bieber's
I was
best
like,
man.
Craig, Curtis. But yeah, so like when I was a kid, I used to go and watch. I don't know if you've heard the name Benny Hinn. He used to be like a megachurch pastor in the 90s. And I used
Okay.
to like take road trips to go see him. Like it was a Taylor Swift concert. Now he's in prison, of course, because as you do. But I remember like thinking he was just so holy and touched by God. And he's just a fraud, literally just a
Yeah.
fraud. And I think they all are. Even the ones who maybe believe God is like real, I don't think they believe they can lay hands and cause miracles, which is also a Pentecostal thing. Pentecostals are known for like laying hands is what it's called, and like touching people and performing miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just really good businessmen who have recognized that people can't tell you no about God. And I think about that about the Bible a lot too. I wonder if back then somebody just really wanted to be a science fiction writer, but they knew that if they did that, they would get chased off a cliff for heresy.
Yeah.
So instead, they claimed God gave them that message and it's part of the Bible. And that's why we have these monsters and this and that and the other,
Yeah.
because they were just J.R.R. Tolkien
Yeah,
2,000
I mean
years.
that's not a bad theory, and it kind of also plays into my drug theory as well.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of different. I personally think if you read about the history of the Jewish war with Rome, there's so many splits between the Jews. I basically think it's like an offshoot of some sort of like religious split with them, and they created their own religion. Like this is way after Jesus was meant to have even existed, and like none of them talk about him, but they all like talk about this massive. It's like the Pharisees versus like these other groups, and it's like it could be everything. It could be like you have creative writing, because I don't know what like stories were like back then in terms of just making new ones up, but yeah, like creative writing,
Creative
and then
nonfiction.
drugs, and like massive political split within like Judea and stuff, and just
And
creates
it's
this like
just
Christian
hot.
religion.
On top of all that, it's just hot. It's just really hot outside.
Yeah,
So you're like
in the Middle
sweating
East.
on top of all of that other stuff. But is there a favorite debunk you like to do that religious people say that history disproves? Or is there one that maybe it's not your favorite, it's actually infuriating, but it's memorable for whatever reason?
So something I would debunk a religious person with.
Yeah, so like something that
Okay.
comes up as an example of, you were talking earlier about how history disproves a lot of religious beliefs, and I wasn't sure if there was like a favorite example or one that like sticks out in your mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, because Islam is really fascinating to me because of how it was spread through like empire and conquest, but just how like different factions just it literally is just like an empire splitting apart and then all suddenly pledging allegiance to different members of Muhammad's family, basically. But that's one I don't encounter as much because I don't argue. Like most Muslims who are leftist aren't like hardcore, so I'm not trying to debunk their religion. I guess with Christians, it's more the Roman Empire stuff is something I've been getting into a bit more, because it's like although most of the Bible was written hundreds of years after Jesus supposedly died, like the Roman Empire at the Council of Nicaea gathering everyone and being like, I don't like that, and that. Here is the Christian religion to make everyone more subservient to the Roman Empire. I like using that because I'm just saying, like, they threw out parts of the Bible which were meant to be inspired by like God and Jesus's life, and you've never heard of it. And the Roman Empire just decided that. So the religion you believe in is literally been dictated by the Romans, and then later on dictated by like the Church of England. Like the King James Bible was translated in a way which made it more pro-monarchy and stuff. So it's like, even if God exists and Jesus was real and he did all these wonderful things, there's so much you don't know about it, and it's been so manipulated to make you just subservient to power. So I like saying that, because it's more like you can't argue that, because it's like, yeah, you think what you're telling me from the Bible is like literally handed down from 2000 or what, or like 000 AD or whatever, when Jesus died, like 30 AD. And it's like, no, it's been translated so many times from Greek and Hebrew into different languages. So you're always going to lose some of it. Because that's something we studied as well. Like we looked at the different Bible interpretations next to each other. And sometimes they'd mean like completely different things in one story. It'd be like Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. And it'd be like completely different. So yeah, I guess it's like I was saying, the history one is my favorite. So I like the Roman Empire thing, just like you believe in a religion, which was just created by the Roman Empire to make sure they could control their territory. I'm trying to think of another one, because there's plenty of like, obviously you have the like really basic moral arguments, like if God is so good, like why does he allow like X to happen, or like, you know, all those different things. But I guess as I've gotten older, it's kind of like I realize if someone believes in God in that way, that's just not a way to argue them out of it, because it never works. Because if you're like, God doesn't exist, it's like, well, how do you know? And it's like, well, you got to prove it to me in the first place, because I'm not stating this. But then like with the history stuff, it's just like, throughout history, like my favorite one for the Catholic Church is why at multiple times in history where they're like 3 different popes at the same time, all like rivals, and they're meant to talk to God, like they're meant to literally talk to God, and then we have one who's representing France, like an Italian city-state, and like, and I don't know, the Holy Roman Empire, and they're all saying, I talk to God. It's like, well, obviously this whole institution is just completely political, and it has
one of you are lying. One of you are lying. Don't know which one.
It happens so many times. It's like I'm reading another book on history, and I've gone backwards, and I used to think, oh, it's just happened in this period. I'm like reading it. It's like, no, it just happens all the time. It's like, I appointed my cousin as new pope, and then this guy says he doesn't like it, so he appoints his like nephew as the new pope, and they have like no, like a lot of them aren't even clergy sometimes, and it's like, I'm meant to believe all these people are saints in heaven, and they all spoke to God and translated his will. And also one more actually is that the First Crusade is the Pope told people, if you go on the crusade and just like slaughter people in the name of God, you will be sent to purgatory instead of hell, because your sins will be forgiven. And it's like, so how do we go from that in 1,000 years, if God is all knowing, to now that killing is bad and don't do it, but 1,000 years ago it was, slaughter like Jews and Muslims on the way to the Holy Land and your sins will be forgiven. I was like, what, has God decided to change in 1,000 years, despite not even being constrained by time and being like billions of years old? So it's just like logical stuff like that. It's like, why have the religious rules changed so much when God is like timeless? Like he's not sitting there thinking like, oh shit, I shouldn't have told the Pope that one. Let me rein that back in. Make us more in 2023. Let's be more tolerant to gay people when I've told them to like burn them at the stake throughout. It makes no sense. So that's why I like the history argument, because it's like all your rules of religion are just dictated by politics of the time. And it's not, and people are like, well, what would you have? Where would your morals come from if you didn't have religion, is something I like to say. But it's like, but these morals have consistently been like terrible. Like even the Pope told people to go to Africa and enslave people for Christianity. But like I said, so God wanted that back then. Why don't we do it now for God? Like surely he'd want the same. So that's my favorite, because it's just like you throw the history back at them. But I guess with Americans, it's probably even harder, because like you're saying, it's so cherry picked. Like they hate the Pope, they hate Catholics. Then they're cherry picking stuff about like, you know, you got to wear your hair to clean Jesus' feet in heaven. And it's like, I think with some people, I think with Catholics is easier, because I'm like, this is your religion, there's the Pope, here's how ridiculous your religion is. But with like Americans, from what you've been telling me throughout this conversation, it's just like, it seems so insane. I'm like, I don't think any argument would ever put any doubt in their mind.
No. Well, and because, again, I don't know what it's like where you're from, but at least in Southern American Christian culture, one of the biggest things you're taught growing up in the church is that faith is everything. Believing no matter what is everything. They even tell you stuff like, as you get older, people will start to ask you questions and they'll start to make you doubt God, and their points and their comments will make a lot of sense. And in your mind, you'll be like, that actually sounds like a great argument. That's the devil. He's tempting you to lose your faith. So
it's
when
like
somebody
Jesus in the desert.
Right. So
Yeah.
when somebody comes to like you comes and is like, "Hey, but what about this historical fact that disproves a lot of what you're saying?" This Christian person goes, "Oh my God, this is what they were warning me about my whole life, that people would come and they would try to get me to doubt God. No, I have to double down. I have to believe. I'm
Yeah.
on God's side. I can't fail." And
It is smart, isn't it? It's like you can never lose then, because it's like anyone debunking everything is just the devil. And as Jesus proved, you've got to reject the temptation of the devil. So like me saying that to them is like, no, it's the devil making you like doubt yourself, which
yeah,
is like is smart, but it's also something I don't really hear in a lot of other religions. I guess it's like American Christianity is really inward facing
very.
in some degrees, especially not when they want to go to Uganda and bring the death penalty for gay people and stuff. Like you have that element, but it's kind of like because it's so regional, like Mormonism, it's like very exclusive to America, a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I think like it's kind of like, and also this is something interesting about American Christianity is that it's kind of like we are the chosen people, and it's Christian Zionism is what I'm thinking of.
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
part of the evangelicals believing like
Yep.
about the end times of Israel. And it's kind of like we are the new chosen people of God, like our denomination of Christianity. Everyone else will die, and like us, 10,000 will be saved, and that's it. So it's
Mm.
kind of it's really like there's probably a good history book about why American Christians are so focused on the end time still, when everyone else, like all the Abrahamic religions believe in it, but you don't really hear loads of Muslims talking about it or loads of like European Christians. But it seems in America, it's like, get the prepper like stash ready, get the bunkers ready. Here comes the nuclear Armageddon, and like
Yeah.
I wonder,
That's
I wonder why it's so not exclusive, but like so like rife in American Christianity. I have to read about it.
I think so. You know how back in the day they used to send all the prisoners to Australia? That
Yeah.
was like the I think truly what happened was all the crazy religious zealots got sent to North America to just get rid of them. And
Yeah.
we literally just kept breeding with each other. And anytime a different group would try to come in and be a part or like just discover America again, kind of like we discovered it the first time,
Yeah.
we'd be like, you can stick around, but only if you follow our rules. And those people didn't want to get burned at the stake. So they were like, sure. So the next thing you know, you've just got everybody here is like a crazy evangelical, whatever. But as they like broke off and kind of traveled the hundreds of thousands of miles across from one another and like went different parts of the country, I think what we would now know as cult leaders got to make up their own rules.
Yeah.
So like everybody was, say, for example, uh Pentecostal before they split up. Well, now this group is down in Louisiana and now they've got a bunch of stuff involving snakes because that's relevant down there. They see them all the time. And like, okay, now we're going to dance with snakes down here. When the ones that went up north, it's like, oh, now we've got a whole thing about you have to have your winter pantaloons be a certain length because it's freaking cold up here all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think like that eventually evolved into what we now know as like Baptist, Presbyterians, Pentecostals, just all the different types of people who came. And especially before there was any US government, they could just do whatever they want and say whatever they want. And if you didn't follow their rules, you got kicked out of the village and then you starved to death in the
Yeah.
woods.
No, that's interesting actually, because like obviously you have states which are kind of autonomous anyway, but
Yeah.
you'd have like settler communities, and it's like, what is the authority? Like some loose British Crown authority, which like is not going to find you if you're out in like the Oregon wilderness and stuff.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is, yeah, it's definitely like an interesting development. It also reminds me, it's like in Islam, it's like the Taliban. It's like it's so influenced by cultural norms. Like
Yeah.
most Muslims, if they knew what the Taliban believed in, would think they're heretics and stuff. So because they're so different from like Gulf Arab Muslims or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's kind of like all that stuff. It's like your locate, and obviously Afghanistan is like between a lot of old pagan religions like Buddhism and Hinduism in India and parts of the world. So it's kind of like stuck between it. So it's kind of like America. It's like if you're gonna, like you're saying, you split up and you go different parts, the culture of that part, even if it is just like a natural culture, because it's after they killed the natives or moved into places that were empty, there's nothing really there to influence them.
Right.
So yeah, it's just like it's just an interesting development. Like I said, I find religious history really interesting, but it's also just very depressing, because I think American Christianity, out of all of it, has its hooks in ideologically more than culturally.
Yeah.
which when I think about a lot of religion in Europe, I think a lot of it is cultural identity, whether that be Spain, Poland, Ireland stuff. And it often leads to like bad political views. Like Poland's government is like really Catholic, but it's crazy xenophobic and like
Yeah.
really anti-left and stuff. But I don't think a lot of their support comes from people like believe in Catholicism fundamentally. It's more that Catholicism is like this identity that ties in with like right-wing politics. Where in the US, it's kind of like a lot. Sometimes I get in arguments with Muslims and they say they're anti-capitalist and stuff, which I find really interesting. But it's like they like, no, we literally reject everything, and like that's why American Christianity fascinates me, because I think like it used to be like we reject everything. Like we're Protestants, work yourself to death to get into heaven. But now, like you were saying, the mega pastors, it's kind of like a combination of really contradictory things. It's like live like this more basic lifestyle, but give millions to this guy to have a private jet to fly around the country. And it's just like, I guess that's the cultural thing. So it's American consumer culture is insane. Like I was talking about this recently, like even compared to the UK, which is consumerist in its own right, it's just so different. So like
different.
If religious leaders flying around on private jets in Europe, you'd be like, no. But in America, it's like, here's like 10 of them, like here's, and they're all different, and it's like, and they're all like so wealthy, like Kenneth Copeland, and you're talking about like, is it Joel
Osteen?
Osteen, yeah. So yeah, like I need to read more about it, to be honest, because it must be interesting for you just to like have all these conversations and be like, not only did I grow up in like a really weird version, it's just like so much more extreme than everywhere else, basically. But it's America, which is meant to be more like progressive and stuff in some ways.
And I think also maybe part of the reason why America has this issue and a lot of other countries, it just looks insane to them, is because I think Christianity lucked out when we started having like economic issues, when we started having political issues, when we started having, you know, even like global warming. I think America has such a like forcing the news down your throat type fear mongering society that I truly think one of the reasons why the megachurch people thrive is because people are so tired of having to make informed decisions that they would much rather somebody else tell them how they're supposed to live their life and just do it. So like if Kenneth Copeland tells you pray and like don't eat pork or whatever, you're just, okay, fine. Kenneth Copeland says, I'm not going to look too far into it. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. This is too much. I'm old. I'm an elderly person and I'm really scared of, you know, Gen Z or whatever. Like I'm just going to do what Kenneth Copeland tells me to do. And then it just spirals from there.
Yeah, and it's sad as well, because with America, more than most, there's not like this social safety net really for a lot of people. So it's kind of like you got to rely on community a bit more. And although this community is exploiting you, like you don't really have anything without them. And it's not even just, it's just like a human thing as well, like preying on people's loneliness and like lack of meaning in life. And I think what's hard about like atheism to these people is you've got to reconcile with yourself that like, yeah, there's no like inherent meaning to you being born. Like it's like an animal being born. There's no plan for you. And also I think a big part of like the Protestantism and even the Protestant work ethic, it's suffering is good. So don't change anything. Like, you know, this is a test by God and you'll have eternal paradise. So if you're falling on hard times, starving or whatever, it's God's plan for you. So you can have comfort in that, rather than for most of us, it's like, oh, like this is terrible. And like, you know, that's just the brutal world we live in. So like, I think I can understand in that regard, like even how these people get to the mindset of, I don't have any money. Like I've read stories of people bankrupted themselves giving money to these churches. And it's like, you think like, how the hell could they justify that? But when you read a bit more and you think about it, you're like, I can understand a bit, because they think like so much that this is how they're going to get into heaven. And if their life's miserable in the short term, then that's just part of, you know, how you get there in the first place, which is obviously like a fundamental difference between Catholicism, which is basically like, just say sorry and you go to heaven. Like I've literally had arguments with Catholics that if Hitler said sorry before he shot himself, he'd be in heaven. Like that's how lenient some Catholics are about the requirements to get to heaven. It's literally like accepting God and ask, like Jesus dying for our sins is like saved us all. So literally just believe in him and say sorry all the time. Like confession is like a big Catholic thing. That's literally what it is. It's like confess your sins and you're forgiven. Where with America, it's like, no, work to work yourself to death and live in poverty, and then you go to heaven.
Right. America has two attitudes. They say, work yourself to death and go into poverty, and then once you die, you go to heaven.
Yeah.
Or they say, oh, you have to work yourself to death because you're in poverty. You must have done something to earn this karma. Like you must have done something. You must have not lived your life right. It's very like religion here is very, the onus is always on you. It's because you sinned. It's because you went against God. It's because you aren't strong enough. It's very, and I think that's why people are so willing to bend to the will of these megachurch pastors and things, because they want as much of the responsibility to be off of them. And they would literally rather just follow whatever rules they say than constantly worry about their salvation 24/7.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. And also like the education system skewing like people's perspective on what's right. And then I guess it makes them more susceptible to this stuff. There's a book about Protestantism and capitalism I really want to read, because it's like in the American context, and just like how basically capitalism is basically like a new form of Protestantism that we all believe in, especially Americans. And I need to read about it because like this conversation is just really interesting to me about like why Americans accept such terrible, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but like why Americans accept such terrible like I guess social stuff compared to European places. Like either, you know, I didn't know what a food desert is. Like people were telling me what it is. I'm like, what the hell is that? And then it's like, oh, only in America can you not be near a grocery store, but you can be near like 10 McDonald's. So like it's just like, don't improve society, just accept it. So like, I need to read more about it, because I do know like a fair bit about American religion, but like even you explaining the differences to me is really interesting, because it's like, oh, like, so it's all just a bunch of cults then, like well, religion is a cult, but like even more like superstitious, like hair and skirts and like snakes and stuff. So like
if you ever want to do a deep dive, let me know. I have so much up here that's just waiting to come out.
Have you spoke about this in depth with someone, so I can listen to it as well? Like you should send me it, because I need to catch up on all this stuff.
I'll send you a couple episodes from people I've interviewed who escaped cults, really strict religions, adhered to very strange rules and didn't realize they were strange until they were out of the religion. Yeah, I'll send you some stuff. I've met a lot of very interesting people that have come from backgrounds you never would have expected. It's just wild.
Well, now I know there's just loads of stuff I've never even heard of. So
yeah. There's people in America where I'll bring something up and they'll be like, who? The what? And I'm like, sit down. Sit down. It's wild to be former Baptist in the South, like raised Christian, and meet people who never were. And I'm like, wow, so you just got to like exist as a kid, like you weren't worried about the rapture or anything. Like that's wild. You have no idea what the Left Behind series is. You don't know who Kirk Cameron is. That's bizarre.
Well, now we all know who he is. So
now we all know, because he's weird. But if you had any advice, say for example, for somebody who wanted to maybe explore outside of their religion a little bit, or maybe wanted to see more of what information is out there, if they actually believe what it is they're being told, if they want to find evidence against it, what would you say to that person?
Yes, you see this a lot on like subreddits, like people who are curious about atheism. It's really a hard one, because I'd say to start with, you have to prepare yourself. Like you can maybe relate to this a bit more because you grew up like more fundamentalist, but like you have to prepare yourself to accept like basically your whole worldview being shattered, basically. Like for you, it might have been a good thing that, you know, you don't think the world's going to end soon, but like obviously, like you know, we're talking about the positive aspects of, you think someone cares about you, life has a goal, even if it's bad, it'll be good one day. And you have to like really prepare yourself mentally to think like, well, this is it. Life has no meaning. Like inherently, obviously, you make meaning for your own life, but it's like, you know, there's no omnipotent being or whatever, omnipotent being like planning all this for you. So I say, like, before you even go into it, just make sure you can reconcile with yourself, because you don't want to like spiral, especially if you have mental health issues as well. Like in terms of like, I'm on this subreddit called The Collapse, and it's really depressing because it's basically people all realizing the world is ending, like for climate change. So I say, if you're in that headspace and you're clinging on with religion, maybe make sure you're mentally prepared before you go down the rabbit hole of all this is nonsense. But then if you really want to reject it, it really depends what religion, but I'll just go from my own experience. I would just say like reading history books, and I'd say focus on like post Roman Empire Europe, and you'll just see. And I've actually read a couple of history books by an actual religious person, and they've made me more anti-religious, which is funny because of the way she writes it. But yeah, if you look through even like, you know, I'd say the period of maybe 400 AD to like 1000 AD and read about Islam and Christianity, you know, regardless of what you are. And I think once you read about the history of the development of the religions we all believe in, you'll just be like, oh, this is so silly. Like, it's so silly regardless of if it's true or not, because we've just all been manipulated by different people. Like, and some of the people who are in charge of the directions of our religion are just really power hungry and stupid. And it's like, and now everyone believes a certain thing. And it, like we're talking about with the American fundamentalist stuff, it's like, where did these weird culty things come from? It wasn't through biblical scholars. It's probably just through some like random ass people like seeing something.
Mental health issues.
Yeah, possibly as well. So I'd say, yeah, the history thing. And then, yeah, I would say the arguments about God existing, like all this stuff, I'd say just don't even. I don't know if it's because I like history too much. I'd say for a lot of you let me know what you think of this. I don't think it's that relevant, to be honest, because it's so hard to prove and disprove. Like, you know, I'd say it's not real because you have to prove something to me. Like, you show me some evidence and there isn't none. So, but then to a lot of people that's not convincing. So I'd rather say you believe in a religion. You don't just believe there is a random God you can't imagine. You believe in a God who believes X, Y, and Z and does X, Y, and Z. And that has all been created by humans to justify, you know, Roman Empire, or justify the Catholic Church, or justify slavery, colonization. So I'd say that's where you should focus on. But I don't know for you if it's more helpful because you grew up more ideological.
Yeah.
Would you say if you were given advice to someone, you'd focus on the ideological, or would you say like the historical might be more helpful?
I would say if I were like specifically talking to like an American fundamentalist or Christian or evangelical or anybody like that, I would say the questions that you have in your mind about whether or not God is real, explore those, because every deconstruction story I've ever heard from over here started with like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Like, wait, that doesn't seem right. Like, hold on, what? And then they asked a question to the wrong person, and then that person shut it down and they didn't ask those questions anymore. I would say ask all of those questions to yourself, like look them up, research them. And if you cannot find the answer that fits religion, listen to that as an answer. Because you can look all day to find what you want. But if you notice that you keep trying to find something like proof that God is real or proof that prayer works or whatever, and you can't find it, maybe that is the answer you're looking for. Just consider that an answer, as opposed to looking until you find whatever obscure Christian blog forum tells you, you know, based on nothing, that everything is real that you've ever believed in. And then I would say analyze whether or not you truly believe. Do you believe because you were told you do? Do you believe because if you don't, you're going to get in trouble with your family? Or do you believe because you've been presented evidence to the antithesis and you still, at the end of the day, believe what you initially believed? Because I feel like there's a big difference between being told that way, being raised that way, or truly actually believing that.
Yeah. And I'd also say as well, I wasn't really thinking, because obviously I'm coming from my own like straight perspective in terms of like in America, especially lots of LGBT people are really self-hating because of their religion. Like I spoke to people who've grown up closeted gay and like fundamentalist communities, like absolutely hated themselves. And I'd say for people like that, if anyone's listening, like fundamentalists, it's kind of like I would seek out the religions that do accept it first to see how they rationalize it, because I'm sure they can already poke like holes that atheists would say as well into like a Christian version of God hates all gay people and stuff based on whatever law probably made in the Middle Ages or something. So it's kind of like you don't have to go from like Christian fundamentalist to atheist in like a month. It's more like you can seek out, there are Christians who believe in God who aren't just absolutely terrible people, and they might have a worldview that's compatible to you. Because at the end of the day, this is how I've changed. I don't care if people are atheists. I care if you have good politics. So if you want to be a Christian and we'll have the same politics, then that's all good with me. Like, obviously, I still think it's a bit ridiculous. And I think religion is bad because of how much it conditions you to accept the status quo, or we're talking about Protestantism and capitalism together. And it's like, I do think that's bad, but like, if we come to the same conclusion that everyone's equal and we want like these basic things to people, then if you're religious, I don't care. So it's like, I don't want to make people atheists. I want to make you a better person. And if believing in God makes you a better person, but you believe in a different religion which doesn't make you, you know, versus the religion you grew up in versus like a liberation theology type religion, then that's good. That's good with me. So that's why like, I don't really focus on anti-religious stuff anymore, because I feel like it's too divisive sometimes. And also the connotations of atheism, for some reason, like because of new atheism, is right wing, and it's like I'm trying to make you into this when I'm really not. I'm trying to like just make you question the status quo. So like, yeah, I do like atheism as a rejection of the status quo, but at the same time, like if you are someone who's really struggling with your faith and you grow up very conservative, I'd say look at other faiths that are similar, which are more tolerant and liberal. And also like it's got like a strong history in America as well. Like even the history goes back to like, I was reading about this guy, I forgot what his name is, this priest in the New World. He's seen as the father of liberation theology. Because he lobbied the Spanish government to enact laws to protect the natives. Like he's basically the main account of the guy. He basically wrote the accounts of the Spanish like brutality in the New World, and he went back to Spain and lobbied the government to change the laws. But he was seen as like this guy who talked about like universalism of humanity and stuff. But anyway, like I found it really interesting because, and I was also thinking, this is a really weird tangent. I was thinking the other day, if I was teleported back in time 1,000 years in England, how would I try and convince people to be better people? And I'm like, you'd have to focus on Jesus, but like actually focus on Jesus, like not the Bible, like Jesus. I'm like, would Jesus want you to do this? And I was thinking that with the New World stuff, because I was like, how do these religious people reconcile like butchering people in the most inhumane ways with believing in Jesus as the savior? And I was like, how would I convince like a religious king to do something good? And I was like, I'd have to talk about Jesus. So that's what I always say, like focusing on Jesus isn't so bad. So if you like Jesus, if he was real or not, who cares? I'd say like gravitate towards that, and you can make that more your ideology. I think sometimes, like actually, one more question for you. Yeah. How did you like? I'm talking about like steps to become an atheist or less bigoted. Like, how did you break out of it? Like, is it like a step like process? Did you like, oh, I'm not conservative, I'm just Christian, and then I'm not either anymore or something?
Yeah. So I considered myself a conservative Christian until I was in like my mid-20s. But the interesting part that I had that's different, I think, than most deconversion stories is I was on the debate team all through college. And that's like how I paid for college, was through scholarships on debate. And it didn't make sense to me that during the week and at tournaments and stuff, it was show me evidence, show me facts, show me this, show me that. I'm not going to believe what you say. I'm going to argue against it until you show me concrete evidence. But then on the weekend at church, it was all about not having facts, not having evidence. You don't need that. That's not faith if you need that. And so those were kind of the questions I had in my mind. And I was also lucky that I had a lot of very patient people in my life. So when I would, go off and say something that I felt like I had the right to say as like a conservative person, they would take the time to be like, why do you think that? Where did you hear that? Well, what about this? Well, what if I were to say that? And to kind of show me the big giant gaps in my logic at the time. And it started to really make me realize that everything that I labeled myself as, or everything that I believed in, was just me repeating what other people said. And that when it came to actually defending it, I would do that conservative thing where I would shut down and then consider it an insult if people just asked me why I believed something. That's insulting. You're calling me stupid. It's like, no, I'm literally just asking you why. No, that's an insult. I'm out of here. I don't want to be your friend. It's like, okay. And so then what a lot of Christians do as they deconstruct is very similar to what we were talking about earlier. They do that whole, oh my gosh, I'm starting to question God. That's what everybody warned me would happen. That's what everybody said would happen. This is terrible. So you go from questioning things and starting to kind of back away from it to hanging on for dear life, just like holding on to it, not listening to like anything anybody has to say, because your only goal in life is to stay Christian no matter what. You're just like hanging on. So I did that for a couple years too, because whenever you finally deconstruct from at least American Christianity, there is a mourning period. There really is, because you realize everybody who's ever told you like, oh, your deceased relative is watching you and they're so proud, like that's not true. Everybody who ever said you're going to see your grandma again one day, that's not true. everybody who said, you know, like my father passed away, and everybody who said, you know, he's in a better place, that's not true. He's just deceased, you know? And so you do go through a little bit of a mourning stage where you realize everything you'd ever been told wasn't true. And then I took shrooms, and that really expedited the process, to be honest.
Yeah, I hear so much, like that's why I'd never ever touch it, but like LSD and like you know, just mushrooms in general, just changing your perspective on everything. So I don't want to ever touch that. But
well, if you're in a good headspace, I would never encourage anyone to do it.
Come out a conservative.
So like I literally went to bed that night a Christian Republican, and I woke up a Democrat atheist. Like, but it wasn't because of the shrooms. It was because I'd had those questions and those feelings, and the shrooms were just like, stop ignoring this part of your brain. Here it is. You have to look at it. So I'm not saying for anybody listening that you should do shrooms. It is not for everybody. It is illegal in some states, and you might have a bad time. I know some people who did not have a great time, but for me personally, that was what kind of pushed me towards that belief, I suppose. Has there ever been anything you wanted to ask, like an American Christian or like an evangelical or something, where you're just like, what is going on over there?
Yeah, I probably have too much, but I'm trying to think about. So yeah, so here's a weird one, right? So would you? I don't know, you, because you're in your mid-20s, so you might have seen this. Would they literally tell you who to vote for?
I'm actually in my mid-30s.
Oh no, I didn't know how old you were, but I said you were in your mid-20s when you stopped being Christian.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, so I assume you'd still be going to church like with adults during like election season.
Yeah.
So would they literally say, vote for George Bush, Obama is the devil, like all this stuff?
Some churches. So like, luckily I never went to one like that because I was kind of on my way out a little bit at that point. But yeah, I had a friend who literally stopped going to her church and went to a different one because they said, if you don't vote for Donald Trump, you don't care about like God's will and what God wants, and you're not a real Christian. And she literally was like,
crazy.
Right. She was like, religion and church should not, well, first of all, church and state should be separate. And so that should just not be happening. But yeah, so I know that it did happen. I personally, luckily, never saw it happen because I was already kind of on my way out. But it did, especially in the South.
It's so weird. It's so weird because it's like, I can understand like implicitly kind of understanding people vote Republican, but like literally going, no, vote for Donald Trump. Like he's so like against so much Christian values. You'd feel like they wouldn't even be comfortable. But like, it's like cultural stuff, isn't it? It's like they probably just like him because he says it would outlaw abortion or something. Like it's not like, you know, they ignore the divorce and the multiple wives and, you know, all the terrible things he said. So yeah, that's something like I just find like really bizarre in terms of like, I guess because in England people are more shy about their politics. Like in the workplace, people, you know, I was always comfortable talking about it. Oh really? Like
Trump is like the first one who really brought that out.
Yeah, because that's what I thought. Like it's meant to be uncomfortable, really, isn't it? Like, and also because America's like, if you watch Mad Men, the show, and it's like there used to be a time in America where people would vote Democrat and then vote Republican. Like it switched because not that there wasn't a massive difference, but people would vote for like Richard Nixon and then vote for Lyndon Johnson because there was a more like secularist element of American politics where like Nixon was religious, but he didn't seem that more religious than JFK or something. When then you had like Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Donald Trump, and it's like, no, these are extremely religious like followings these people have, and you kind of have to be religious. So it kind of makes sense that like then everyone's just coming out like, this is my religion and also my political identity, which is tied up in it. So yeah, that's something. It's just like, like separation of church and state is something even Republicans sometimes like to say, but then it's like, nah, just like you know, literally override everything secular these days. That's where it's going. I guess one more thing would be, obviously, I don't even need to ask this because you told me like the Armageddon stuff would be very like prominent. I guess what I'm interested in terms of like, so yeah, like, what year would you be like going to church a lot? Like, what would it be, like mid 2000s or something? Like you'd be going.
I went to church regularly until maybe 2013.
Yeah. Okay. So it would be relevant. So what did they like? How venomous were they about gay people? in like
Yeah.
church sermons and stuff.
So, and this kind of leads into a point I wanted to make about what you were saying last time. So I grew up in Arkansas, but I moved to Chicago when I was in 11th grade, and I lived there for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So we would always go to churches that would never say anything about gay people. Like, I don't remember that ever coming up in the pulpit. They would say things that were kind of condescending, like love the sinner, hate the sin, that sort of thing. Like, they wouldn't say, they were not gay affirming. They were not like, it's okay to be gay. They were just like, it's okay for you to be gay in my space, like in my area. That's okay. You're allowed to be here and be gay. But the gay part wasn't okay.
Yeah.
But I do remember I went to church with a friend and her brother because we were on a road trip, and on our way back, we were stopping to see your brother. And since we stayed at his house, it's like, okay, I guess we're going to church with him in the morning, you know, that sort of thing. And I do remember them being like, the gays are poisoning the minds of our children. And it was a very large mega church type situation. It was on the border of Texas. You know, Texas is like its own lawless wasteland. So that was my first experience of like, when the hymns were being sung, there was like imagery of the American flag and like eagles billowing on the screens. And so it was wild. Like, even for me, who thought I was a conservative Republican, it was like way too conservative Republican for me. And like eagles were like flying and people were like wiping tears off their face. And then and then after the songs and stuff, the sermon became about how like we need to protect our children because the gays are here to like convert all of our kids. And that's when you hear all the people being like, amen, amen, amen. And so I know that happened a lot. I was raised in like a more liberal family. So we were never anti-gay. We were never any of that. Like, some of our best family friends are gay. And but I do remember in church a lot of that, like, love the sinner, hate the sin, like women shouldn't preach. They should sit at the feet of their husbands. It's his job to preach, yada, yada. But I think the reason, and this was what I was going to say toward your other point, but I think it fits here too. The reason I think that Trump was so divisive and so successful is because he not only brought out the Christian, you know, Christians were always like, Republican and Christians always kind of been a thing, but he brought out the ability and the social norm to say things that up until then people had been shamed into not saying. So when I was a kid, you couldn't say stuff about Jewish people. You couldn't say words like pussy. You couldn't talk about assaulting women. You weren't supposed to say that. Whether or not you actually felt that way, that's different. Like, I remember people used to like refer to the Mexicans, but they would whisper at least, you know, they would have and what Trump did was he came out and he's like, I'm running Republican. And they're like, oh, okay. And he's like, and I'm anti-Hillary. And people were like, well, I'm anti-Hillary. So that's cool. I don't agree with anything else this guy does, but that's cool. And he's like, also, I should be able to make fun of handicapped people on TV. And everybody kind of like holds their breath for a second. But all the people who have secretly made fun of handicapped people were like, well, shit, me too. Right. And then when he's like, oh, you can grab a woman by the pussy anytime you want, they won't do anything about it. All the people who up until now, we've been telling, that's weird. Don't say that stuff. Be quiet. Now they're like, I can say it now. So it's not that people became that way. It's that they always were that way. But in Obama's America, you can't talk that way. In George W. Bush's America, you were not allowed to talk that way, right? Like, you cannot say that stuff. You can think it and you can have whispered conversations about it. And if like your neighbor girl gets attacked, it's like, well, she was dressed like a slut, you know? So, I mean, but you can't say that stuff out loud. And he just made it okay to say. So people came out of the swamps. I remember reading about people who hadn't voted in like 25 years voting for the first time, because for the first time ever, there's somebody just as bigoted, just as small-minded, just as divisive, just as, I'm going to say what I want, whatever I feel on TV, you know, come at me, CNN. And like, that's why he just like took us off the rails.
I guess that's why he's seen as the worst president, because I don't think he's actually the worst president. I think George Bush is the worst president. And maybe I'd say actually Bush, Reagan, then Trump. But one thing he is unique at is he's just totally poisoned political discourse. And not saying like it was ever like great, but just like I was even the Aztec thing, like it just blew my mind. People with verified ticks, their face, full name on a Twitter account are telling me that slaughtering, literally calling native people savages, that killing them all was a good thing for religion. And I'm like, I could literally just ring up your job right now, and I don't know where you work, but I could literally just show them this. But you don't even care. You're telling me in public, and that's the problem as well. Because like you're saying, it's they always fought it, so they don't even think it's wrong. They think that it's not like, oh, here's a hot, spicy, edgy take. It's literally like, now I think this, and now I can say it. And like Elon Musk's Twitter is a good representative of like the culture Trump's created, where it's just like the stuff people say on that. Like I was seeing some of the stuff Elon Musk was liking, like, and I was like, this is insane. Like, when did this become okay to say like all LGBT people are pedophiles and we should commit violence against them? And I'm like, when was this? This didn't even seem like it was okay like 20 years ago when there was more hostility towards them, like generally. And it's like, that's what Trump has done. Like, he's unleashed these people, and it might be like a vocal minority, but it doesn't feel like that anymore.
It's not.
People they're so emboldened to say those terrible, terrible things, and it's really depressing because it's like, at one end we have like a more prominent, like tolerant movement, but now it feels like in where there was inroads being made and making like general society more tolerant. Now it's just like, no, it's split. Now it's like, here are the tolerant people, and everyone else just like proudly intolerant. Like you're saying, you used to not be able to say in public, like since the 1990s, that gay people are like pedophiles or something like that. But now you can. Now you can say it again. Like literally in the last 3 years, it feels like it's gone from you'd be like hounded out of a job, fired or whatever if you said gay people or pedophiles. But now I'm literally looking at massive conservative influencers with like tens of millions of followers just writing it. Like there was some like riot yesterday, and it's like an anti-LGBT protest versus a pro-LGBT protest, and then they're assaulting the LGBT pro-LGBT group, and everyone's just supporting it on Twitter. And I'm just like when have we changed so much? But like you're saying, like that's why like sometimes it's hard to not be against religion, because it's like it primes you to think these things, and especially American religion. So when someone comes on like Donald Trump, and also I think what a lot of Americans don't really realize what fascism is, but like what you heard at that conference kind of just describes it like insane patriotism, insane racism, insane patriarchy. That's all like priming you for fascism. So when a guy like Trump comes along, he's like, yeah, all these things, and also I might like overthrow the US government and make myself dictator for life. They're like, hell yeah, like I like that. But then if I'm like, do you consider yourself a fascist? I'm like, no, Nazis bad. Way. And it's no way. But it's like no, you literally will go along with all this stuff. So like that's why it is hard sometimes, because I have a lot of sympathy, like yourself. Like you had basically no chance at not being how you were.
Right.
Like because you grew up in that community. Like you literally had no chance. And it's like you had a moment where you changed, but you could still just be like that as well.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. I think about that all the time. If I hadn't moved, if I hadn't maybe like tried shrooms or something, like how different of a person would I be? Would I have still deconstructed, but it would have taken 15 more years? Would I have stayed Christian? I think about that all the time. I have like fever dreams about waking up the same person that I was at 21 and 22. But absolutely.
So it's very hard, because it's like, the thing is, it's like you're shaped by your environment. So there's a version of you that never came out of it. But then there's loads of versions of just like you who will never come out of it. It's because they're never exposed to anything other than it. But then at the same time, like, so I have a lot of like, I don't believe in free will in that regard, but then it's kind of like very frustrating as well, because it's like, then you see how hateful they are. And just it's kind of like, I do hate you, but I also recognize you're a product of a system where you literally had no chance at not believing this stuff.
Right.
So it's very hard for me in my head, because it's like hating religions in general is kind of like, how militant you get is basically how much you read and how radicalized you get. Where now I kind of feel like people are products of their environment, so you had no chance. I don't blame the individual as much.
I used to think that until Trump came out in full force, and that's when I realized people do know exactly what's right and what's wrong. And they've been monitoring themselves all this time, but now they're not anymore.
Yeah.
That's what made me realize, because I used to be the same way. It's like, oh, you're a product of your environment. And to a point, I still believe that. Like, I do believe that your economic status growing up can change a lot of what you have access to. Like people who grow up in areas where nobody has a lot of internet access, nobody has a lot of library books. Like, sure, those people are going to have like a much smaller view, I think, of the world. But at the same time, because of things like TikTok, YouTube, even just some of the websites that we allow people to use in public schools, I don't think there's an excuse for ignorance anymore. I think there is an excuse for being curious and discovering things that you don't know and admitting like, oh, I had no idea, I never knew that. There is no excuse for I don't know it and I don't want to know it. To me, that's where I draw the line. It's like when you are willfully ignorant.
I do agree, but also I don't agree in some ways, because like I blame smart conservatives who are well educated. I 100% like Ben Shapiro, all the Daily Wire people, I personally blame them, because you should know better and you're choosing this. Whereas like, even because it's like when I argue with people about history, it's like you're arguing with me and you don't know anything, but you could type this in. There's PDFs online, like even Wikipedia is good enough sometimes, but it's like they don't want to. And I'm thinking, there is something in your environment which has stopped you. And I think because even if you get knowledge, critical thinking skills are so important, and most people don't have it, so they can't. So like there's that meme, it's like people think Fox News is the news because it says the news, so they think it's the facts, they think it's true. And it's like I can't change someone who thinks that. You need to be like, who's telling me this? Why are they telling me this? Like, where else should I look? And I think for a lot of people, especially Americans, because the nationalism shoved down your throat so much, it's very hard to think like, it's like I wouldn't, it's not as extreme as this, but obviously America inspired Nazi Germany, and it's kind of like growing up in Nazi Germany and trying to be someone who like trying to reconcile yourself. You grew up in one of the worst countries in the world in terms of like what it does to people. And I think for Americans, like it's like so many different illusions you have to dispel, and even if you like come out of some of them, you still got to reconcile different things yourself. But that's what I mean, it's so wrapped up in like American patriotism is so wrapped up in Christianity. It's really hard for a lot of people to be like, oh, not only is God not real and my religion doesn't exist, this country is actually like the opposite of what I was told. And like, who am I if I don't believe in America and Christianity? It's like, how can I? That's what I think. It's like, how can I expect everyone to break out of that? And it's hard because it's like we're saying about community and stuff. You're gonna like the community you're saying, like some of the ones you visited. It's like if you come out and say I reject this, then you can lose everyone, and then you're on your own, realizing something really depressing. And I know some people would say that I'm happier that way. Like I'd rather be this and not have no one than be that and have these people. But then like it's very hard, because for me it's like I get very angry at individuals, and it's like I try and take a step back and think I've been very privileged in like my upbringing. Like my parents are very hands off. Like, you know, me and my siblings are so different from each other, and it's because my parents weren't overbearing, had like a great education. Thankfully, because I'm like middle class, I was able to do these things, and I was able to develop on my own without like obviously lots of cultural osmosis. But it was like I'm very privileged to like, this is like I've known who I am from a very young age, and I haven't had to be like, oh my god, like I'm so different now, which I can imagine like with you, especially what you've been saying, like it can be very difficult. Whereas me, it's like I can see I can see the core of myself when I was younger, and it just took this many years to get to where I am now. But like if I spoke to my 14-year-old self, I think we would get on fine, and we'd have like similar morals and stuff. So that's like a nice thing to think about. But then I've as I gotten older, I've realized I'm just really lucky, because growing up in a certain country, even growing up in a certain city in this country, London's like really progressive compared to like a lot of places. So yeah, for me, it's really hard, because like you're saying, like you can blame certain people, but if I was talking to you 10 years ago, I wouldn't hate you personally for the terrible things you were saying. And I would, and like you were saying, you even recognize you're repeating stuff you heard. And I recognize it sometimes when I'm arguing with conservatives. I'm like, you're just repeating. I've heard this a million times. You're the saying the stuff you heard someone else say. So how I'm just the thing I'd say, I feel sorry for people a lot. I'm like, I can't imagine what your life is like, that you're hiding behind an anonymous account to say this terrible stuff to me. And I'm sad, because like your life must be pretty rubbish, or your environment must be insanely toxic. So like even sometimes the environment isn't toxic, but for some reason or another they seek out this kind of community online. So like you're saying, like I think I'm a bit more to the extreme end of, I find it hard to blame anyone for their actions, which is not a great mindset to have sometimes, because people do have personal accountability. But it's like it's something I wrestle with, because it's like I get angry at individuals, then I'm like, there's a scale of how much I blame you. Like Ben Shapiro, right at the top, Harvard educated, meant to be really smart, terrible person, like he should know better. Then there's like all the people, you know, that in that church you just described to me with the American flag, and it's like, you never had a chance. And I'm guessing a lot of you are probably low income as well, in terms of, and like bad education. So like, am I meant to feel like intense hatred for all of you? But at the same time, with religion, it's like, well, if we have something like the Nazis, for example, you're the people who'll be propping up that whole system with your beliefs. So then it's very hard, because I guess the question people ask themselves with something terrible like that, like, what would I have done with the Nazis? Would I have stood up? And it's like, well, we can see most of you wouldn't, because you go along with all this other stuff. But then it's like, are you just completely brainwashed into that? And then most of the people who speak out are normally ostracized, or in more extreme circumstances, like just killed because you challenge it. So yeah, like I think I actually find it really interesting that you're more on the personal responsibility thing, considering you grew up in that environment as well.
Yeah, and let me rephrase. What I should have said is, I lose what's the word I'm looking for? Pity, or I lose sympathy for people who have had the opportunity to research, learn, and rejected it. So, for example, there are a lot of people in like backwoods towns, southern cities, who, like you said, have a lot on the line when it comes to being religious, being Republican, you know, fitting in with the family, fitting in with the church. Maybe they're not exposed to a lot of libraries, sources. Fox News is the only news that streams in the house. I do pity those people, and I do think those people are a product of their environment.
Yeah.
It's when you have opportunities and you reject those opportunities because it's easy for you to stay the way that you were. You know, we talk about a lot of people who are like, old times were the good times. Those are always straight white people. Always going to be the straight white people saying that.
Yeah.
It's when you have the opportunity to learn, or to meet different types of people, or to be more tolerant, and you reject those because you are more interested in staying like ignorance is bliss, or you're just more comfortable doing what everybody else is doing. That's where I lose a lot of my sympathy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't lose all of my sympathy, because again, when you see somebody, like, I would argue that some branches of conservative Republican groups and places are a cult. I believe that that's a cult. And I believe that people can be indoctrinated into that just as easily as they can be indoctrinated into a faith, a religion. So there are some people where I look at it and I say, this is a cult. This person is the victim of a cult. They are being brainwashed. I'm not going to treat them the same way that I would treat, you know, somebody who is Harvard educated and just feels like being an ass on the internet.
Yeah.
But at the same time, having been in that environment and understanding how many opportunities I had to explore the world outside of my beliefs, and I chose not to because I was offended by it and I didn't want to pay any attention to it, and I would rather just vote for Mitt Romney than learn anything. That's where I lose that sympathy, because as much as there is an income disparity in, say, like the South in America, there are lots of people who grew up middle class just like me, who had a computer in their house, who went to a nice high school, who drove a car when they were 16. They have cable, you know, and it's interesting that you can find Fox News and you can find like South Park, but you can't find anything else on there. Like, are you sure? Or do you just not want to? And I remember how uncomfortable I always used to be when I was proven wrong. And I would just take it so personally, instead of being like, you know, I keep being proven wrong a lot. Like, maybe I should read some more stuff, or like, maybe I am wrong. Instead, it was just me being hard-headed, being like, no, those people are bad. Those are bad Democrat liberals, and I'm right. Even though I'm wrong, I'm right. And I'm just going to hang out with people who think I'm right. And I'm just going to follow people on Instagram who think I'm right. That's where I lose my sympathy. Because it's like, if you have to fight that hard, if you have to kind of like, you know, if you have to tell people you're a nice guy, you may not be a nice guy. If you have to tell people that you're right all the time, maybe you're not right all the time.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because I think it's not even a religious thing. Sometimes you just have to like look at your own self and think about like people. I haven't experienced this too much, but like, you know, if you're in a relationship and you break up and you think, well, it's all the other person's fault, but then sometimes you got to think about like, what, and if it keeps happening, it's like, well, is it actually me? Like, are all these people wrong, or
Yeah.
is it me? And I
Yeah.
guess it is like you have that element with, you know, people in relationships that keep on being terrible people forever, and they're always like, well, it's someone else's fault, it's never me. So I guess, especially if you believe like quite bigoted things, and it's like, well, gay people are going to hell and I hate them, and it's like, well, why do you think that? And it's like, no, you know, I just got to keep saying that. I guess it comes to a point, especially like you would have been emotionally mature when you broke out of it as well, so that's something I guess you have to consider, because like when you're a teenager you can understand because you just, you know, say what everyone else says. When you're a bit older, you can question it a bit more because you just get exposed to the realities of life anyway, and like you meet different people, or you know, you live your life, you know, and you understand the world better. So like, yeah, I guess you can lose a bit of sympathy as people get older, but then I guess for me it's mainly poverty and lack of education mixed with religion. I people just absolutely brainwashed, and
absolutely.
how can I? And the thing is, I don't know if you've watched those. What's the show with John not John Oliver, John Stewart used to do? The Daily Show? Is that what it's called?
I think it may have been the other Daily Show with Jon Stewart.
But there's that guy, he interviews Trump supporters. I don't know if you've seen it, and he basically points them out to be massive hypocrites. I don't know if you've seen this on YouTube. And I made a video basically saying it doesn't matter that you've shown them to be hypocrites. They don't care, because sometimes he points them out to be massive hypocrites, and they realize it as well in the moment. And I said, but the minute they stop talking to you and go back to their tribe, they're going to completely forget you even said that to them. Like it's not making a dent in their head that they're wrong. And like you were saying, you just got angry. He exposes them so bad where they're left like speechless sometimes about how wrong they are. And he makes them basically say stuff against Donald Trump by their own logic. And there's like, you know, they walk away, and it's like, I'm just like, that's not going to work, because they're going to go back into that environment. So even if there was a light bulb moment and they spoke to you, the minute they go back, they'll be cheering for Donald Trump and everything he says, because it will never break through. Like for a lot of people, it can be like a light bulb moment, or it's like a really long journey. Or for a lot of people being like closeted, like gay or trans, like, you know, and coming to terms with that. So that's why I kind of said, when you were saying for advice, I was like, you really have to reconcile yourself that you're about to destroy how much you're sure about the world. And like you did it as well, because like you grow up in this fundamentalist religion, it has the answers for everything, and then the next day you don't believe it. It's like, well, you know, what do I even like believe anymore? And that's why I said maybe, you know, liberation theology might be a good substitute in the short term or something, because how hard is it just to be like, you know, for me, I'm lucky, because I was saying I never grew up believing the world was ending in like whenever, or I didn't go up thinking God was going to come like, or like, throw me in a fiery pit for, I don't know, drinking when I was 14 or something. So it's just like, I can't imagine it so much. So like, that's why I try and have a bit more empathy of this stuff, because I can't imagine it myself, but I can recognize these people don't have the same opportunities as me. And that's why, but then it's hard, because it's like, how do I even help that? And and that's why I shifted so much from anti-religion to anti-capitalism, because what I see it as is a economic problem, so much as like a ideological problem, because like you're saying, some of the worst places in America for fundamentalist religion, or even different parts of the world, is poor countries. And why is that? Like lack of education, dictatorships, lack of internet, no exposure to anything else. So if we solve that, not that religious problems would go away, but it would severely undermine a lot of religious control, I think, because critical thinking is so important to breaking out of a mindset of, you know, Noah's Ark was real, or, you know, Adam and Eve is real. And if you're never exposed to like opposing views and an environment where you can like be challenged, then how are you gonna break out of this brainwashing? And that's like, for me, why I've started shifting my content significantly from just pointing out, well, religion hypocritical doesn't make sense, because I feel like at the end of the day, I think that can only go so far to people. And you have to tackle the root problems of why did you grow up fundamentalist, and if you scale it back, like, you know, to your parents' generation or where you grew up, and but you do make an interesting point about the middle class stuff, and I think that's where, like you were saying, the empathy can run out sometimes, because I think suburban white people, middle class, voted for Trump more than poor people. I think I read somewhere. And it said they don't talk about that. They like to paint it as hillbillies who are dumb and racist, rather than, no, families making like 300K, 400K a year. They voted for Trump.
They were the ones.
They're more than poor people.
Because he was good for business. He was good for business.
Exactly. And then that's like, you know, I understand your logic of if you grow up in a middle class environment with everything taken care of you,
blue ribbon high school,
yeah,
like
you have no excuse to be a terrible person, basically.
right.
Whereas when you're poor and you're just pumped for this propaganda with a terrible education, then you have no hope, essentially. Like Rush Limbaugh and Fox
Right.
News
Well,
die at
and
24/7.
yeah, and think of it this way. So I don't know how food banks and things work over there, but here, just not even a mile away, there's a food bank that will give you a free meal. And during that meal, they preach. It's a church, it's run by a church. So you come, you get free food, you get to eat, it's warm, and you also listen to a sermon. So to me, it makes perfect sense that you're like, when I was a kid, every time I got a good meal and a hug was at the church. When I was a
Yeah,
kid, anytime that I got toilet paper to take back home or the lights were turned back on, it was because of the church. So why wouldn't you thank Jesus? If somebody was feeding you when you were hungry and every time they did it, they were like, I'm doing this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Like he wants you to be happy and full. You're like, well, shit, I'll follow Jesus. Hell yeah.
yeah,
And I know that that's how my family got involved in church as well, because my family's from like the mountains of Arkansas. We're talking, we can live on certain mountains that are national parks because my family was there first. Like we
oh,
like
really?
hillbilly country, redneckery, although they would
Yeah,
say we're not rednecks, we're just hillbillies. Big difference. But I know that a lot of that religion came from, we're getting fed by the church, we're getting housed by the church, we're getting
yeah,
clothed by the church, like the community that we have, the people that come out and help us when there's a drought and we have a farm, the people who come out and fix things for us when, say, the husband is sick and the wife is home with the babies, other men from the community come and they help, mow the lawn or whatever. That's always church people.
yeah,
So, and I know my mom grew up very poor, and a lot of her best experiences were from religious people or from the church. So it makes perfect sense to me that if every positive thought you ever have comes from the church, of course, like it makes perfect sense. I understand. But it's when you start deciding that everyone else should also live that way that you lose me. So like
yeah.
I've never, I'm trying to think of something that I really hate. Not a lot of things. I hate the taste of Jaeger. I think it's disgusting. I have never drank Jaeger and been so upset that I wanted to go to the United States Capitol and pass a bill that nobody else is allowed to drink Jaeger
Yeah,
because they don't need to participate in something that disgusting. Like, oh, I just don't do it. I just don't
yeah,
do it. And so where I lose my patience, luckily not communicatively, but mentally I lose my patience is when, because you aren't allowed to do something, or because you're told if you do something that's against God, nobody's allowed to do it. And I was
yeah,
telling somebody the other day, the way that American conservative Republicans think, you would think that the Bible says, if any gays exist, we're all going to hell. If anyone gets an abortion, we're all going to hell. When in reality, it's a lot of mind your own business stuff. It's a
yeah,
lot of like, so you don't get an abortion. So you don't marry a man if you're a man. Problem solved. You still get to go to heaven.
yeah,
Why do you care about transgender people? Why do you care about drag queens? Like that's the big thing right now, the big
yeah.
popular to do. When all you have to do is keep your nose clean and you get to act cavalier about being better than everyone and you still get to go to heaven. What's the problem? It
It
just
is
seems
really weird, isn't
it
it?
seems exhausting to be a conservative, super conservative Republican Christian. I do not have the mental bandwidth to care about what kind of sex my neighbor is having. I don't even want to talk to my neighbor. I don't even want to meet the person. Like I just I want to mind my own business.
Well,
It's
I
just
think
wild.
it's the nationalist element because it's like the soul of the nation rather than their community, and I think that's where it comes. Like when I see Matt Walsh tweet about stuff, I'm like, why do you give a shit? And he's like saying, oh, this is the way our society is going. So I think fundamentally, a lot of them are Western chauvinist fascists, and it's about like Western civilization falling. And for some reason, like you're saying, if you're going to heaven anyway, do you really care? But I think a lot of these people are hypocrites, but also it's just a mixture, isn't it? Like religion is just part of the ideology, and
Mhm.
you have this like political ideology as well. So, like obviously, in fascist movements don't accept anything that's outside the traditional Western gender
Right.
binary, abortion, and stuff that's like affront to God. So, yeah, for a lot of people, especially middle class people, I think the political element comes in a bit more where it's like, you know, I bet middle class Republicans are far less religious than like poorer Republicans who are religious. I bet they believe in it far less, and I bet they're more like secular outwardly. It's like when Trump supporters were getting mad they couldn't get dates in Washington. It's like you want to have your cake and eat it too. Like you want Democrats to date you, but you like believe in these terrible things. So I think a lot of them, it's the political justification as well. And I need to probably read more about the psych of like fascism and stuff. But it's kind of like there's probably just something that feels good about just hating people and feel like you're making the world a better place in your own fucked up way. Like this is how we get, like we're talking about like going back to tradition, like this is how you get to a better society. Wasn't the 1950s better? So let's do that again. Where it's just like, you know, for certain groups maybe it was better, but like not for everyone.
As long as there is somebody worse than you, you're better.
Yeah.
So whether it's Black people, Mexicans, gays, trans people, drag queens, as long as there is somebody for you to hate, one, it deflects from all the sins you're committing. Nobody's going to pay attention to your sins. If you're like, burn the drag queen, they're like, yeah, let's do it. They're not paying attention to the fact that you just had gay sex with a dude back in your house. Like nobody's going to notice. But also, you just feel, it's just this idea where I think religion has a lot to do with it too, where you feel so downtrodden. You feel so under so much pressure. You feel like, especially a lot of these fundamentalist religions, especially like Calvinism, where it's like God already decided if you're going to hell in Calvinism. He's already decided. You don't know. You're not going to find out. So it's just this constant rat race of performatively being the best Christian you can be, having all this turmoil on the inside, having to not ask any real questions because that's going to get back to somebody that you were asking and they're going to think you were doubting. And it's just easier to point at somebody else and be like, well, at least I'm not a, you know, dirty foreigner. And people are like, hell yeah. You know, like that's
there's I do think religion plays a big part in it. But then I firmly, because the same things happen
too.
Yeah, the same things happen in the UK where we're falling down this like terrible right-wing pipeline, but we don't have the religion element. Like it's not like our prime minister is extremely right-wing and Indian Hindu, and it's like a lot of the government are not Christians at all, and a lot of people.
Interesting. I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah, it's multicultural. Like the new leader of Scotland is Muslim, but like he's progressive, so that's good. But it's funny because Muslims bad and backwards, he's progressive, and the Indian Hindus who normally are seen as progressive, that's the right wing guy. But it's just like, it's depressing. But in America, you can dissect it a bit more because the Christianity and the nationalism goes hand in hand with the UK because it's so secular. I firmly just believe it's this Western supremacy, Western chauvinism, because that's how you can fit in Black people like Clarence Thomas in America or Rishi Sunak, our prime minister. That's how they fit in with. It is white dominated, but it's like all these groups together. So I think that's the direction. Like, you know, with Americans, it is more like white supremacist, but I still think there's like room for different groups in that movement if they're religious as well. But it's just like for me personally, it's just too depressing to think about sometimes. So that's why like I try and not stay in my lane, but it's like sometimes if I start reading about all the terrible things religious groups are doing in the world, I can't also think about that and think about climate change, terrible political things. It's like if I start reading about how like female genital mutilation in like sub-Saharan Africa and like Muslim majority countries, like I don't want to read that. It's good to be aware of it, but I don't want to start reading really terrible things on top of everything else I have to read. Like, there's a limit to your brain. And I think we focus on America, and obviously it makes more sense for you because you come from that community and you know, you're American. But like we focus on America because it's so in our faces. But it's just like, I think it's also a good indicator of where the world's going sometimes. Because like the UK isn't the same as America, but we do have a lot of the terrible aspects. And I think Trump has poison the culture here as well. Like it's definitely changed our politics. It's really right-wing populist now, and it's really just depressing. But then you could maybe diagnose it in America as religious, but then it seems like it's not religious because we have it too. So it's kind of like morphed into this horrible like different ideology where like I don't think Ron DeSantis is religious. I don't think Donald Trump isn't religious. I don't think any of the Republican runners. No. I don't think any of them are religious.
No,
but then
but they know how to play that side.
But it's because religion is so powerful in terms of there's a like very rich people who bankroll the Supreme Court people, and they dictate what happens in the country. So you only need the minority. It's like with any movement like this, you only need a minority who are powerful to enact it for the rest of the country. Because now, like, you have Donald Trump saying he's going to do a nationwide abortion ban, but no one wants that. No one wants it apart from a small group of people who have a lot of money. And it's like, you might exist in the country because of the economic system where abortion is banned, where 70% of the people want it legal everywhere. And that's I guess the scary thing with America is that although we have the same problems with like a certain group of rich people doing something, you have this like religious ideology which is being imposed on you everywhere. But it's not because the majority agree with it. It's because rich people, like not even rich people, it's like a minority of rich people want it, and they'll pay enough money to get these things enacted. And I guess that's the really scary thing about America.
Money talks here.
Yeah, it's like you see like the Saudis in Saudi Arabia, and they have imposed this terrible form of Islam on the country because they're wealthy. And it's the same, and it could be the same in America, where although The Handmaid's Tale isn't very realistic for a lot of its setup. It is kind of like you could have, not in terms of militant like in that, but like an insurgent group of like Supreme Court justices. If you get like a couple more, if Donald Trump gets elected and like there are some older members, you could literally just completely change the face of America everywhere and make it more compatible with like Old Testament crazy like evangelicism. And it's just like
literally happening right now.
Yeah, it's just like a really, really scary thing. Like that's what I was saying as well. Roe versus Wade, that was the opinion was when Nixon was president. And that's why I'm saying it's changed so much since Nixon, because now you have it overturned and it's going to get worse as well. Like they literally, that's 50 years ago, a couple months ago. And now it's going to go backwards. So like, yeah, but then for me, like, I don't know if you're an optimist about the future, but like for me, it's why I'm so pessimistic, because there's too much to untangle there that I don't think it can be stopped. Like you have the religious element, you have the financial element, which helps drive the religious element, and then you have the political element, which is linked but not exclusively. And it's like, how do I convince people, like people you grew up with, not to go along with this? Like, can I even do that? Like, I don't have the financial power to reverse brainwash them out of it, but they have power to brainwash them even more, and they are. And it's like, how do I, like, is America just a lost cause? Like, would you want to just leave?
No.
Like, would you flee?
So I would definitely take up the opportunity to leave if given the chance. But it's definitely not a lost cause. And I realized that after I started this podcast, oddly enough, because there are so many people who are silent about stuff that they're no longer on board with. So, for example, a lot of Trump supporters are actually no longer Trump supporters at all. I read a lot of stories from people that are like, in the last election, my parents were like ride or die Donald Trump, and now he's just too much. He's too extreme. He's not making any sense. They do think that he, caused the riot at the Capitol. So the good news is a lot of people are starting to see the difference. I think the reason he was so big to begin with is because for example, like old creepy men always love to be like, "Back, you can't even compliment a woman no more without her calling the lawyer or the cops." Those are creepy people. Those are like rapists and molesters, right? So like those were the people that were like, "Yeah, get him. We want it to be like the old times." But now they're starting to see like, I don't agree with a lot of the things he's saying. I don't agree with a lot of the behaviors. I do think that was an insurrection movement. Like especially people who like served in the military, they're like, that's not
like
what I fought for. Yeah. And so, but they're not as loud about it. They're not nearly as loud about it. They're just slowly not posting that stuff as much, where it used to be like, my God, trigger the libs. Now it's like, oop, I'm just not on Facebook as much anymore. Whoopsies. And so I am seeing that. We are seeing large numbers of people leaving the church. And at least here, at least in America, you are much more likely to be a liberal if you are an atheist. Those two just tend to go hand in hand. Usually people who grew up super duper religious also grew up kind of Republican and conservative. And I get a lot of messages from people who say things like, I can't subscribe to your podcast because it can't be seen on my playlist, but I want you to know I listen to every episode. Like I can't, right? Like I can't let people know that I'm deconstructing, but I want you to know I've heard every episode and like keep it up. And these are people that like I went to high school with, I went to college with, I went to church with as a kid. So that's the kind of thing where I'm like, we're not as loud and proud about it. We're not making the same sweeping claims that we were when we were doing all the bad shit. But it's that quiet stuff that I think is really going to make a lot of changes. Also, Gen Z here, I love Gen Z here. They are crushing it. If they're the future of America, I have such high hopes for us, because like when I was old enough to vote in the last few elections, and still like so many of us really didn't, or we really didn't show up for stuff, or we didn't really attend anything. We just like put it all out on Facebook and maybe went to the polls. Their generation couldn't even vote. And they were doing stuff like buying up all the tickets to Trump rallies so that nobody would be there and it would be like an empty thing. They are showing their protest through much more, in terms of people who care about capitalism, in much more painful ways, more painful ways. They're hitting people in the wallets. They're hitting people in the merch, you know, like they're getting people where you wouldn't think that would take down like a leader, but it does. Getting their TikTok accounts banned, stuff like that. They're doing what they can, and they can't even vote yet. And they're already out here doing that. And it's very inspiring.
I think it's kind of like I feel bad as well, because I do agree with what you're saying, that the younger generation seem better, but part of it is also because the future is really bleak for them. Like totally. I mean, the future is bleak for you, and you're like a bit older than me, and then it's even worse for me. And then I'm thinking of the next person, like the age difference between me and you, for me and them, and it's like, no, it's really terrible for you.
It sucks for us all.
There's no hope, and there's like levels of how bad it is, and that's what I want to leave the UK as well, because I just can't stand like where this country is going, and then I just feel bad because I'm people growing up and like literally. I think for me it's just the alternative we're being offered from this, like, in your country it's like Christian conservatism, and in mine it's just like Western chauvinist conservatism. Is like the option isn't different enough, and it's not going to be the solution, and then the cycle will continue. Like if Joe Biden wins again, then there's going to be another Ron DeSantis or Trump who's going to win the next one, and it's just delaying the inevitable. And then if he doesn't win, then that's just America's just absolutely fucked. So, like,
right. Unless we somehow get the very first gay atheist in office who's like Democrat leaning or starts their own party. But you asked a minute ago if I'm an optimist or pessimist. I would say that I am well aware of all the pessimistic things that are happening, but I am an optimist because I know that I'm doing whatever I can. So like, for example, we have a bunch of rescue parrots. I love parrots. They're great. I love them. We rescue them when they're, old or sick or homeless. Or we've got 8 parrots out there, I do what I can. I troll all the forums. I donate money to the bird rescues. I give them food. I actually, my merch line right now, if you buy one of my Budgement Day shirts, it goes to parrot rescues. I do what I can. My dog, senior dog that I got from a shelter in Chicago like years ago. And like, I can do that, and I can make a podcast, and I can vote. And those are the 3 things that I can do. I can't be driving to Washington every day. I don't have the funds for that. I can't, I don't think that I personally can do what needs to be done to make like an actual dent in the LGBTQ movement of any kind. I can show my support. I can buy things that raise money, but like the good things that I could do is I can make sure parrots have a house and can live out their 80 years with a lot of food. And I can make sure that I vote.
Did you say 80?
Oh yeah. Parrots
80 years.
The average parrot has 3 owners in its lifetime. Yeah, because it outlives all of its owners.
Oh my God.
When you get a parrot, you have to make a will. Like you have to make a line for it in your will because it will outlive you.
I never knew this, because I've been like getting it like on Instagram, like seeing what animals. I went to like an elephant sanctuary in Thailand, and they said an elephant that just died there just before we got there was 102 years old. Yeah. And some of the elephants there was 70. And then also I've been following like gorilla accounts, and it's like they're like the oldest one is like 55. I'm like, these, like, I didn't know all these animals, and like that is amazing for a bird. I was like, I've never heard of a bird living to 80, so that's a good fact you just told me.
Like that's why you got to rescue them, because if you get them when they're young, your grandkids are going to be raising these parrots.
Wow. That's pretty cool though, because especially because some can mimic speech. So like just like mimic something you say in like your voice to like your.
One of my parents told me to go fuck myself the other day because they had seen Better Call Saul on Netflix too much.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's like, yeah, some parents, like the ones we have, average about 30-35 years. But the larger ones, like the macaws and the grays, the ones that talk the most, they can live 80 years easily. Yeah.
Like I obviously know like loads of animals like turtles and stuff live like 150 years, or whales or something. That I've never heard of that. So I should probably get one and leave it to my children.
Well, not only do they live that long, but they continue to say what you've taught them to say. So like if you teach them like just because it's funny, like a dirty word, they'll say it for 80 years. Like,
oh, that'd be so cool. Say it when you're like 10, when you're 80, the parrot says it back to you.
Right. You say something sassy in like 1920 and like 1950, they say it. And they have accents too. You can you can get birds with British accents. It's whoever they were raised around. That's who they sound like. Yeah.
I need to research this more because I never knew any of this about parrots. I just thought they'd like live to 20 and like mimic your voice, but living to 80 or something is amazing.
Yeah, there's probably rescues near you that'll let you go check them out and like talk to him and stuff. But
not annoy my like girlfriend so bad just with a parrot.
Listen, oh, they're so cool. We're people's like crazy bird friends because we have so many and we like know so much about them. I just love parrots. I could talk about them all day. I should have a separate podcast for that.
Yeah, the parrot podcast.
This is the podcast where we talk about the presence of parrots and the absence of God. Thank you. But yeah, oh, I forgot. Oh yeah, I was saying all that to say, I know what my limits are now, and I know where I can make an impact, and I will focus all of my time and my energy on those things instead of doing like 10 things mediocre. I would rather do 2 things well and make as much of an impact as I can in those 2 areas. But that is why I have faith in the future, because I find more and more people, and maybe it's just because we're getting older. How old are you?
27.
27. Okay. I'm about to turn 32. I'm old as fuck. And maybe it's because like my generation, we're just like tired. I don't know. We're just grown-ups. A lot of them are parents, I guess. I don't know. But I think we're starting to, in the beginning, it was like, we're all freaking out. We have to do so much. We all have to be responsible. We have to sign petitions and march and this and that and the other. And we're recognizing that like going crazy and spreading your resources too thin doesn't do anything. But focusing on like the 3 main things you can do really well and a lot and focus your time and energy on are very helpful. And so I think people are starting to find exactly where it is they fit, and they're starting to do something about it.
So you are optimistic compared to me, and it's also, it's not a mindset I disagree with at all. Like, I guess for my final point, like on the podcast, it's just, for me, why I'm pessimistic is everything you're saying I like totally respect, and I agree with, like, you should put your skills to good use. But even like, you know, the way I even see my YouTube channel is kind of like what is this really? Is it just like some fun, not even fun, but is this just my job and it's all about me? Or like, I obviously really care about what I'm talking about, but I'm like, I don't think it's making much of a difference. But even people tell me, they message me saying I used to be conservative, I watch your channel and now I have same politics as you, and I'm like, that's really cool. Some guy recognized me in Vietnam, like first time ever, and I thought it was like cool. The sickest thing ever. Literally just on a random street corner, like 5,000 miles away from my home, American guy. But then he was telling me how much like he liked my stuff, and I was like, oh, it's really cool to see this in person. But then I just think about like, you know, the wider world and how like pointless, like I guess that's the atheist talking, and like pointless life is, but also how helpless I am to change anything really, in terms of like what I get depressed about is, because I love history as well, but I see like, you know, I think about the world in terms of longer time periods, and I just see like the future ahead of us, and it's just very depressing. And I'm even thinking about like beyond my lifetime, and it's just very like, the one thing I hate is that although I have left-wing politics, which is more collectivist, I have become increasingly selfish as I got older, because I'm just like, what's the point anymore? Because I can't do anything, and then like I don't have any hope left, I guess, is the main thing. So like, I totally understand what you're saying. It's like not something I do as well, like do your best at your thing to help people.
Well, and don't get me wrong,
does that,
it's bleak as fuck. Like I am a pessimist. I am a pessimist, but I also recognize, very much like you said, there's nothing I can do. The world is going to get hotter. People are going to get poorer. Politicians are going to get richer. They're going to get more horrible. Like because I can't do anything about it, that's what makes it easy to step back and be like, the world's going to shit if I get a bad night's sleep tonight or not. Like the world's going to shit, you know. So
I agree as well.
But I do think you sell yourself short on the impact that something like your channel can have. I do think you sell yourself short. I think because every single person may not send you a DM about it, you may not think that it's making an impact, but it really does. It does.
Yeah.
Now, what they do with that impact is up to the individual person. You know, maybe they aren't conservative anymore, but they don't tell anybody about it. They don't say a word about it. At least that's one less person, right? That's thinks that way. But yeah, I think there is a fine line where we can be absolutely, you know how the human brain like won't allow you to think about death for too long because then you like spiral. How your like survival skills are literally like, don't do that. Your ape brain like won't let you think about it. That's how I feel about society. Like when I think about it, I'm like, wow, this sucks. And it's only going to suck worse. And we're going to get very little reprieve. And then the other part of me is like, yes, so I might as well enjoy it while I'm here, like as much as I can.
You have that moments like today, like I'm not working today, so I got up and I was thinking like, oh, like free day, awesome. But then quick flash in my mind of like just how terrible, like I'm not thinking about how terrible life is. I'm like how terrible the world is. And I always get that when I'm having a nice time, it just flashes in my mind like, oh, something terrible. Like you've read something on Twitter today about the UK going to shit. And it's like, now you're just like spiraling like, I gotta leave, and just like it's hard, I guess, for everyone, right? And that's in like tying it all back to religion. I can totally understand in terrible times why people get even more hardcore about not leaving their faith, because like it's when I became so you became an atheist 7 years ago. So what's that, like 2016?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And for me, it was like 2013, and 2016 was a bit depressing, but I look back at 2013 now and the world just wasn't as bad. And I could feel a bit more optimistic about like rejecting everything like that. Cause it's like the world didn't feel like it was ending. Like in school, when I was learning, I was in geography, like high level at school. And it's like, I'm still learning like climate change is an abstract thing. It like 2025, like I'm going to be 30 years old, like that's forever in the future. But then it's like, and then I'm like, no God, like world is fine. And then I get to this period and it's like, shit, like the world is just the worst. And like, wouldn't it be nice if I had some, you know, like death is not comforting, or maybe it is in some ways, because it's like I don't have to see the world completely implode. But like it's like I hope it doesn't become harder to pull people out of like your old mindset. But I'm thinking with the direction America is going and other countries, that becomes even more attractive. Because also I found this is my final point. What I found about conservatives, which really frustrates me, is what I've seen them change is when like 2016 Trump era is like capitalism is great, America is great, and it's changed from all of that. They don't talk about capitalism being great. It's more like everything else is bad. Like the world isn't getting better, it's shit, and you have to accept that as a conservative. And we have no vision for a better future. It's just like what you're proposing is bad. So it's like no longer is conservatism about like promoting good things. It's literally just like, no, status quo, don't change it, and that's it. And I think like even that shift, like for some people, like I'd say some people, they want that change, but for a lot of like Christian people, it's like comforting. It's like, no, all band together, protect what we have left, and don't give in to like people want to make your life bad. It sounds like hypocritical, but I guess for a lot of people it's all about comfort, isn't it? Like we're talking about now how hard it is to deal with this as atheist people and left-wing people, and like how much you got to reconcile shit with yourself. But how nice would it be if you know, you still thought you were going to heaven no matter what? And why don't we protect Christianity against those like heathen leftists, and we'll all be safe one day. Like the world is just like temporary and paradise is forever or whatever. And it's like yeah.
Sorry,
but I mean, but also because Islam is like the fastest growing religion. Like even more people become Muslims.
Yeah.
And it's like we think about it in like the Anglosphere, but like that's even more people who are going to believe this in the face of all this tragic stuff that's going to happen to the world in the next like 50 years. And like for me, it's just like, that's why I get so depressed, because I see all that stuff increasing. I see all this, you know, attractiveness of maybe like a more authoritarianism with conservatives, and it's like that's why I try and not think about any of this stuff most of the time. But it's nice to have a voice. But it's kind of like I can't think about this because I know I think you're so good saying ignorance is bliss. I'd say I know too much for my own good, and like I really know too much for my own good, because most of the shit we spoke about, I would never say this to anyone I know.
Right.
Like not even my girlfriend, really, because it'd be too depressing to talk about that together. It's nice because we're talking to people like, you know, we're talking about as people who both have different perspectives, and like,
yeah,
it's not like I have to see you tomorrow and then it's like that was depressing, wasn't it? It's like it's in like a vacuum where like if I say to my girlfriend all this stuff, it's like then we see the news and it's like, oh fuck, like what you said yesterday, oh it's happening. It's like, oh yeah. So it's like yeah, so I guess like you're saying like the impact, I guess it's nice to talk to people about this to feel better. But I guess for me, like the how nice it was to reject religion when I was younger, like that feeling is not coming back. I don't think. Like it's just like rejecting stuff now. It's just like I was optimistic then, and maybe you were in 2016 as well. But now I'm just like no, worse. But back then I was like, oh yeah, I'm free. I thought, but now I'm just like.
Well, I did read a statistic that might make you feel a lot better. It made me feel a lot better, and I reflect on it anytime I start to feel bad. Within the next 4-5 election cycles, at least in the United States, they will all be dead.
Yes.
All of the conservative Republicans who voted for Trump will be dead. Like that's the stats don't lie. There will be more Gen Z of voting age within the next 4 election cycles. And the majority of the most conservative right-wing voters, based on their age and their health and all that, they'll just be dead. So they can, I think what's happening is they're fighting tooth and nail right now because they know that, because they're aware of that. They know they're dying. They're trying to leave their wisdom and their thoughts and their ideology behind so that we'll protect it. They're seeing that we won't protect it. We are literally throwing it back in their face and being like, fuck you. I don't want anything to do with this. They're totally panicking. They're putting people in office, especially like in America, where some of these are lifelong terms, right? And certain parts of the government, they're doing whatever they can to help their legacy last beyond their death, which I don't know why they care. They're not going to be here. Why do they care who's getting abortions?
Yeah, they'll be partying it up in heaven. So
right, exactly. Exactly. And why wouldn't they only want people they like to be in heaven? Right? That now's primo opportunity to get everybody they don't like to be an atheist.
I don't know what Christianity is. There is some form that is about convert as many people as possible or some shit. Like I don't know which one specifically. It's one of the American ones.
Yep.
Like
that's pretty much their whole thing.
Yeah, it's like just keep converting.
Proselytization. Yep.
Yeah.
But that makes me feel better. Is when I'm like, oh, all of these people that are rude to me in line at wherever, because I live in Tennessee, just anywhere, they're just rude. Cut me off in traffic, guzzle gas, vote Republican. They're all gonna be dead. Makes me feel better.
I mean, let's just play into the optimistic framing that young people will be better, and let's hope that keeps up, because I do agree to some extent, but sometimes I'm just thinking like the world will be too far gone. But also because of how dystopian the world is getting, I'm just scared of people getting brainwashed in new ways, like Twitter and stuff. So like
I have an episode I'll send you where a gentleman talked about how he actually got involved in 3 cults. Because a lot of times when you leave one cult, you think, I'm never getting sucked in again. I'm never going to fall for this. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it actually leaves you open and vulnerable to get indoctrinated all over again by a group that seems like a totally different group. Right.
Yeah.
So I do think there are social cults among us, but I don't think it'll be anywhere on the level of like evangelical American Christianity. I think that is hopefully dying down and dying out with the people that believe in it.
Yeah.
But
let's just hope it's not replaced by something like the UK has, which is secular conservatism, chauvinism, basically.
It will be. But at least I won't have to worry about seeing them after I die. Like, I hated you on Earth. Why would I want to see you in heaven? God damn. Well, Cav, this has been a really fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you taking so much time to talk to me. I know that you have tons of content to put out. I know you've got like a major audience, and I just really appreciate you telling me kind of your story, learning about you, giving me your thoughts and opinions, and just putting your content out there, because I think it's important that people with views like ours should be making them as accessible as possible, at least to people, to show them that that opinion is out there and that it's okay to have, and what it looks like to analyze one side versus the other and kind of break down and show, you know, evidence, proof. I think you do a good job of showing people how to refute and negate in your videos, which I think is really important. But yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate having you on. And where else can people find your stuff? Do you have a website that I can link?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I really enjoy this because I haven't spoken about religion in ages, because I don't generally do that these days. Well, I kind of do, but not like this. But yeah, so anyone ever wants to find me, because my name is really unique, just at the Kavernacle on everything, like Instagram, Twitter,
literally
YouTube.
Everything. Yeah, I found it all
literally
over the place.
It's just the same thing everywhere. No one else is called the Kavernacle. Some Twitter bots have tried to steal some usernames, but that's about it. And yeah, just main things, my YouTube channel. That's pretty much everything. Instagram is a bit more personal in terms of, like, I posted loads about my travels, like it's all archived on my highlight reels. And Twitter is where I just tweet about politics all the time. So that's pretty much everything. But yeah, YouTube's the main stuff. So go watch that.